Now we're off. Hi, guys.
I don't know. I'm just not feeling big.
What, mate? Come on. Here, I'll tell you what, try this.
Ooh, is it working?
I'm going to say lose the hat.
Insurance costs boiling over? Search for the right cover at the right price and compare the market. Wake up to waste on your health insurance. Simples.
Hey, Diane.
Is my name.
Good to see ya.
And you can find the 40 people that were at the cross. You can find every detail of the crucifixion and the resurrection of our Savior in Isaiah.
Okay, this sounds good. Hey, Tricky. Good to see you, mate.
You've heard of the Bible code, the Torah codes, the Bible code, or plural, if you will. Well, we're going to have on tonight Jonathan Matthew Wright. He's a Bible code researcher. And when I say Bible code, I'm not just talking about the Torah. I'm talking about the Bible itself, the entire Bible, Old and New Testament. And you might be familiar with this, with the Bible code, simply from media. For example, there was a book written by Michael Drosnin back in 1997 called The Bible Code. And then, of course, there was a film in 1999 called The Omega Code. If that's your limits, if that's what you're familiar with, then you're going to want to tune in tonight because Mr. Wright is going to dispel a lot of myth behind the Bible Code and provide a lot of great insight.
Looking forward tonight with Mr. Jonathan Wright. He was somebody we met down in Orlando at the Prophecy Conference, and I'm looking forward to that interview tonight. There's a lot of questions I have pertaining to the Bible code, pertaining to code search. I think he says code searcher, and it's very interesting.
I'll just sorry for talking over you. Folks, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, that's HomelandSecurityUS.com, on the front page, the top entry there, the Bible code, fingerprints of God embedded in the Holy Bible, posing it as a question. Jonathan Matthew Wright, his Facebook connection, his link is there, as well as his YouTube series is there, and that is the Facebook group is Code Searcher. And the YouTube is link is up there as well. I just wanted to make sure that people were directed there and were able to get to his group on his website as well as his Facebook page. Wow, it slipped my mind there for a second. Back, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special Monday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. It is a live broadcast. Today is the 7th day of April 2014. For those just joining us, we have a very special guest this hour, and next hour joining us is a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Matthew Wright. I had the pleasure of speaking with him at length today, and also at the Prophecy in the News conference. He caught my attention because, folks, we hear about the Bible code, right? If you're like me, where do you hear it from? Well, a book or a movie, and of course, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, and I would urge everyone to do that because there are, in fact, extremely important links to our guests' website or Facebook presence and what am I trying to say? Facebook presence as well as YouTube series. But you'll remember, perhaps, back in 1997, a gentleman by the name of Michael Drosnin wrote a book called The Bible Code. And then there was a movie in 1999 called The Omega Code, addressing the Torah code, or the code in the Torah, the first 5 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, if you want to call it that. But tonight, Jonathan Michael Wright, he is a gentleman who caught my attention. He's been very studious over the last number of years, well, since 9/11. He's got an amazing story, but he has been working on the Bible codes. Now, very simply, and I can let him explain, of course. I can let him explain himself what the Bible code is, but many people believe and many people will assert, and I contend, properly assert, that there is indeed a code within the text of the Bible, a divinely inspired code, not something put in there by little green Martians or whatever, but and certainly not something that would be randomly accessible. What I'm saying is, in the Hebrew text, especially in the Greek text, both in the Old and New Testaments, which differs, by the way, from the assertions or the contentions, as I understand them, from Michael Drosnin and others. There's a hidden message, and there's a code, if you will. And if you understand the Hebrew alphabet, each letter represents not only a letter, but a picture and a word. Just keep that in the back of your mind. But we'll let our guest explain more about this. It's our pleasure to welcome Mr. Jonathan Matthew Wright. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com for the links to his YouTube and Facebook websites. But with that, Joe and I would like to welcome you, Mr. Wright, to the Hagmann Report.
Thank you. Shalom, and God bless you guys. It's such a pleasure to be your guest. It's an awesome show. I've been following you guys for a few months, and I had the pleasure of running into you at the conference. And, I'm just excited that God's opened the doors to be able to speak, because there's, like you were saying in your synopsis there, there are those that have already put the information out now that had somewhat of a bitter taste in people's mouth, especially what they call failed Drosnin predictions. And, and so it's a blessing to be able to show what really the codes are for, and kind of debunk what's already out there in the myths about what the codes are. What? So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad I got to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's great. Now, Joe and I were talking earlier today, and here's the problem that we have. A lot of times there will be a story, or there'll be an account with using Bible codes as an example, and it's interesting how things get convoluted, whether it's intentional or with the best of intentions, yet or perhaps even diabolical, nefarious, we'll say.
Right.
But the fact that it's great, and folks, we talked with Mr. Wright, and in fact he brought some of his research to the Prophecy in this conference, and to see the amount of work.
So Diane, they have gun raffles in America, do they? That's pretty interesting. I never knew that.
The analysis that he's done is so he's done his homework, and he's dedicated his life to now doing this, and he's got quite a story to tell. But Mr. Wright, for those people who might not know what we're talking about, the real Bible codes, what are they? Just give us kind of like a Bible code 101, if you will.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, let me just say that the codes are not just in the Torah. What you'll hear from the rabbis, Rabbi Glazerson and Ribs and others, they hold to the truth that the Torah is the blueprint of the universe, which is true. These words were actually given to Moses on Mount Sinai, word for word, letter for letter, which we now call the Torah. Now, based on that, these rabbis believe these letters are divinely inspired and hold some intrinsic power within itself of revelation. That is true to a point, but it doesn't stop there. And it goes further than that. It's even dimensionally, cross-dimensional bounds. We've heard in the prophecy conference at the lecture The rabbis are now working what's called dimension, which is a cubed form of looking at the codes. Now, there's a misconception based on Drozen and his books that codes are for prediction. And that is totally untrue. God didn't give us a crystal ball to know the future. It's like giving a loaded weapon to a child, and I told you that today. So this kind of, when I started researching this, I wanted to know what God's purpose was. It was obvious to me, based on the statistic and probability data, that this was more than randomness. This was more than coincidence. And guys, I've gone and looked into what they call the monkey text or the control text. War and Peace, Gone with the Wind is essentially booked with an equivalent amount of letters as we're talking about in code that you use to check to see if there's it's a scientific experiment really to see if there's anything there. And from looking at these other texts, I can tell you that there is times where there's a random occurrence of words that may come together. But to take it further than that is impossible. You just can't find the level of encoded stuff as you do in the Bible. To me, it is absolutely unequivocally a divine hand. It is the DNA of the Bible, if you will. If you wanted to look at blood cells on a molecular level, you'll see the fingerprint of God in DNA. It's the same thing with the God.
I like that. I like that. Now, just to be clear, so people understand this, because I had a difficult time understanding this initially as well. When the Bible was written, the text, or as it's written, imagine, folks, you know the paper. If you go to a party store, for example,
you got good to see you.
These big rolls of paper that cover your tables, for the party. They're huge rolls, and so it's my understanding, Mr. Wright, that the Bible, written in Hebrew, of course, and one writes, the Hebrew language is written from right to left, and it's written out very carefully, and it's written out on this continuous scroll, or this continuous piece of paper, like I described, and on each end is a cylinder or something that would allow the text, or the actual copy, to be rolled up. Is that an accurate statement? I mean, this is what we're looking at okay, we lost the connection of Mr. Wright. We're going to get him right back. But it's my understanding, folks, and I'll just fill in the time here as we're waiting for him to come back. It's my understanding that this is exactly what how the Bible, the text of the Bible is written. And it's just one continuous, they're not pages, it's just a big piece of paper, if you will, and handwritten from right to left in Hebrew, and it's all on this one big piece of paper. And this is another thing that I learned, and I'll have to double check this with Mr. Wright when he comes back, is that if, for example, a scribe back when a scribe was translating or transliterating or copying, whatever you would like to call it, the Bible, I shouldn't say translating, but copying the text of the Bible, the scribe would, if the scribe made a mistake, an error on a letter, we'll say on the last word, last page of the text itself, you would have to start all over again. So imagine that. That's the level of accuracy. Do we have this right back?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Did I do justice to that, Mr. Wright, or no?
That's a good visual of the codes. The people that hear me on YouTube hear me talk about the cylinder. What we're talking about is a mathematical algorithm that came about from Rabbi Riss. He's a mathematician, and in my opinion, one of the smartest men on the planet. He deals with things called group theory. It's a very complex form of mathematics, and he's so intelligent, but he recalled the story of Weissmantel, a rabbi from the World War II, who was using what was called equal letter distance skip to send messages, secret messages to help the Jews escape.
Guys, we don't use buggered here for sodomy. It's a term we use to say you're very tired. Like, yeah, I went out today, I'm buggered. You're tired. It hasn't any sexual meaning at all.
Oh.
Although
No.
I do know it means sodomy.
Their death. And what he did was he
Good, Gigabyte.
applied
Look forward to seeing it.
mathematically to a computer program and put the Bible in it as each letter has a reference number. And when you're looking for your initial search term, it's called an access term, the Bible code program will.
It sounds like Mr. Wright's having some Skype issues, as we do so frequently here.
Isn't that interesting? Well, perhaps you can send him a message and we can find an alternate method of getting him back.
Yeah.
Gigabyte. Sodomy means sex between men. A man and a man commit sodomy.
Yeah, I'll send him the call-in number and
Okay, all right. But earlier in our conversation today I just found it fascinating because for number one, there's a lot of information contained.
I knew what you
in the
meant,
Bible
Gigabyte.
code.
I knew.
And if you look at some of, folks, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of, I don't want to say garbage out there, but there's a lot of. Oh, okay, hey, we're back. Okay.
The enemy will work to suppress light in every way, but I'm asking for God's anointing, His blessing on this,
I know how the mountain broke its back.
and rebuke anything that's try to hinder what God is trying to show tonight. So in Yeshua's name, I pray. Guys, I don't know how much of that you caught or where I was cut off, but I was trying to explain how RIPS came about writing the program. Initially, this information came through Jewish rabbis, Hagmann, the elders, who are very skilled in their knowledge of Hebrew, and there's only one problem. They still have a veil of blindness. And you can find this in Romans 11, when Paul's talking about things that are being hidden from the the Jews, for the benefit of the Gentiles. It's called the church age. That we will be coming upon a time in history called the fullness of Gentiles, when that veil will be removed from the Jews and they will be able to see things that have been hidden from them. That applies to the codes as well, guys. If you follow Blagerson on YouTube, you can see time and time again him looking for the Messiah.
Here we go, first link of the night. Thank you, Diane.
Tables, that Yeshua is right there, but he can't see it because he's looking for a man. He's looking for a king that will be like David. So anything that comes from them, either by intention or ignorance, there's going to be a.
Diane, that link said the courthouse where Trump's charges are being heard. Has he formally been charged? I didn't know he was formally charged.
Level of things still hidden there, if you understand what I'm saying. Michael Jonathan, on the other hand, was a Jew that doesn't even believe in God, a Washington Post reporter who set out to debunk God. And by his actions, the Bible says what was intended for evil, God will turn around and make for good. By his actions, I found out about the codes, because until he did that, these rabbis were not going to release it to the public. It was never something they were going to share, and they've been doing this from the.
So Diane, the court's going through the evidence to see if there's a prima facie case. Answer. That sounds like what's going on.
60s to 70s.
What do you call it? A grand jury indictment.
And it was only in the 90s when Drawson got a hold of it. He tried to debunk God. Go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but this even predates that. Of course, you were telling me about I believe it was Isaac Newton going and looking, attempting to see if there was some sort of hidden messages or encoding in the text. So it goes back, but he
Right.
had
And he got it. Right. And see, he got it, the idea from reading, the Talmud and some of the ancient writings of what they call sages, because this has been thought to be possible for over 1,000 years. There are Hebrew scholars who
Did you drop off? All right.
Yeah, the call-in number in his Skype there. For whatever reason, if he keeps having problems and wants to use a phone, he has a number when he comes back.
They're going to prosecute him for paying off that Stormy Daniels, but he'll get around that by saying it was a non-disclosure agreement. I can't see how they can get him for anything else. He just says it's a non-disclosure agreement, and that's not illegal. So, and he didn't break any laws when he got with her anyway, as far as I'm aware.
We can give that to him, and that would be a more foolproof way. But he was right when he says, that the enemy will do this, as we know from too much personal experience. Use whatever means they can to end a conversation, end somebody from getting some information out. And looks like he's back with us. And Jonathan, I just want to let you know, in your Skype box, I did put a phone number in there. If Skype gets to keeps doing this, and if you want to connect by phone, that is an option, and then you have the number in there. Okay. We can keep doing this, and as I was saying, we have so much personal experience being electronically attacked and tampered with like this, and I know it gets frustrating, but we just keep plugging away, and as you prayed before, we know that the Lord will make way.
Amen. And it is the enemy. We know from Ephesians 6:12 that there are principalities and spirits in dark places that are working overtime to suppress what is God. So if it comes down to it, guys, I can call you and try to go that route. I don't know where I was cut off, so I don't know where to take up from. Can you help me out?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? I had mentioned about Isaac Newton, and then you had said, of course, this is before the advent of the technology. Now, at some point, the technology was developed to identify the equal letter spacing, encoding, shall we say? And of course, this is applied to the Bible. Now, an important distinction here. You were talking about Drazen being an atheist, basically. Is that what you were saying, or an unbeliever? I don't know if an atheist is the right.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah. He calls himself an agnostic because he in his plight in searching the codes, he's at least left us.
Yeah, that's a good point, Diane, to detract from the banking system that's going bust at the moment. That's a good point. Because what more do the left media like to do than bash Trump? They get the ratings up when they bash Trump.
They used to say there may be a God, which was the same thing that happened to Albert Einstein toward the end of his life. He came to a place where he said there has to be a God. Well, Drazen's gone a little away from that, and he's now more apt to believe that there are aliens that actually put things in the Bible for us trying to alter the future, and I highly disagree with that. I believe that's a deception from the enemy, really.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, when you had mentioned that during our conversation earlier, it got me thinking that my goodness, this is really literally the spoken word of God. And folks, where I believe this is important to all of us, why we're talking about this tonight, is because in our conversations with Mr. Wright, there are some very significant findings within this Bible code, within the Bible code, that have been discovered that apply to us today, and that we're talking about. I'll just wet your whistle a little bit. Everything from Oprah to Obama to who knows what. Okay, I mean, there are things in the Bible code that are applicable to where we are in history today. And
Or the
so that's
bushes,
why it's
yeah.
important. But getting, I guess I was getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So okay, so we could go through all the mathematics of the technicalities of this. I guess suffice it to say that we're looking at a series of texts where when using a basic term, I think you called it an access term, access word.
That's right.
And that's what Russia doesn't like about America. It calls the West, actually. He doesn't like the West because he calls us perverts and all that. And he's right. The way the gay agenda's just taken off in all the Western countries. And I agree with Putin on that.
That's
Okay.
right.
You use that,
That's right.
and then just briefly go through the mechanics. I mean, since we're
Okay, let me just give you a good example. And this is, listen, this is complete revelation from the Holy Spirit. It seemed obvious to me as a code searcher to get information from here, which is the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, when the disciple will say, tell us when the end will be, and what will be the signs of thy coming, and the end of the world. And then Jesus goes into, I believe, a rundown of everything that we're going to see. From seeing false Christ to famines, pestilence, earthquakes, and not in any particular order. He just gives it to us there in the way that he does. He uses terms like the beginning of sorrows. Now, initially, that seemed to me like an obvious search term, and there you go. It's there. And so, to me, Jesus was showing in the hidden text when or what about the beginning of sorrows sets it apart from any time in history. It was obvious to me that these points, these data points, could probably be applied to a timeline. And people that follow my channel have seen me doing this. Things like the abomination of desolation, another term that comes out of the Matthew 24. The other is the return of the Son of Man, which we know as the day of the Lord. A lot of information came out of that. The lesson of the fig tree.
Diane, I saw Henry Kissinger say about 10 years ago, I didn't see it 10 years ago, but he said it about 10 years ago. He said it's up to China to bring in the New World Order. And on yesterday's news here, they had Xi Ding, whatever his name is, a Chinese leader, meeting Putin, and they said they were creating a new order. They didn't say New World Order, but they did say a new order.
We know this is about Israel. This is another obvious search term. And indeed, the parable of the fig tree, that is the actual access term, parable of the fig tree. I believe it's only one time in the Bible. And then eventually we come to in the days of Noah. And
yeah, tricky. That's like the North Korean guy. I don't know his name. I call him Kim Young-suk. I don't know his name, but it's a weird name. So I just call him Kim Young-suk.
There's a lot of deep things about that too. Jesus wasn't just using that as a reference. He was telling us literally that it's going to be like that time. Look around, guys. Modification of food, of animals, and even people. Abortion came from fallen angels. And what do we see today? 70 million in this country alone. So it is indeed like the days of Noah.
Interesting. Well, okay. So how do you, I guess I'm looking at a couple of different emails I just received. How do you go about, in other words, when you are researching these Bible codes, what do you do? I mean,
what's the process?
What's the process? Yeah, that's a good,
Yeah. Okay. That's a very good question. I get that a lot. How did I find things? It really comes down to this. I get in a prayer, guys, and I get to a place where I'm talking to God constantly, or singing, and just getting in that mindset of being connected to our Father. And it's at those moments where God starts showing me things, or He'll say something to me that I don't even understand at that moment. I've been studying Hebrew for several years, but I'm still a baby in Hebrew. And I think God has a purpose in that because He takes the least of them, the most least likely, the smallest of them, to glorify Himself. And so there may be times where I'm going down the road and I'll hear something. And the latest, this is the last, and I've shared this before of what he said. I kept hearing the term Hane Yamin Biden. Hane Yamin Biden. And I didn't know what it meant until I had to go look for it. And it actually means, behold, the days are coming. And what do you know? One of the tables that I'm working on, it's appearing in the plain text. So what it says to me is God's leaving little breadcrumbs, and He leads me just a little bit at a time. Because if He gives it all to you at once, it probably is going to overwhelm me. So He kind of leads me along and shows me what.
And Diane, she wears a wig. Do you remember she went and got her hair done at the hairdressers when everyone was locked down with COVID? Nancy Pelosi. You seen her walk across the actual hairdressing salon, and her hair, she didn't have a wig on, so she hardly got any hair.
He wants me to see. It's usually something that's on my heart and I'm thinking about at the time, and that He makes a connection there, or He may confirm it through other people. For instance, Mark Phillips, Jonathan Kahn. I was looking at stuff connected to the year 2015 and 2016 that I didn't understand. There was a cycle, it seemed like some.
Yeah, she looked like a really old lady, didn't she? She put some makeup and wig on. She looks old, but in that one, she looks like she's about 90 years old.
Something with the sevens. And it wasn't until I heard Jonathan Kahn and got the information from Mark Phillips about the blood moons.
Okay, I'm doing Jonathan Kahn tomorrow, the Harbinger.
I could overlap their data to mine, and now I was getting more of the puzzle and could see what God was telling me. And what I was seeing in that was there's coming a time, guys, and in Hebrew it's called the Moed Mishpat Nerasha, which means it's appointed time for a decisive judgment. We've been given warning after warning since 9/11, and God's taken us through a process of judgment. So, how I find terms is strictly the Holy Spirit. There's nothing in my own power, guys, that enables me to do something that I'm really not equipped to do, or maybe even be qualified in some people's minds. I don't have a degree in theology. Like I was telling you today, I was doing something totally different. Had my mind on something totally different when God pulled me out of that and brought me to this.
Right.
And
really, it's just like us, Yeah, I mean, you're doing something you really didn't set out to do initially,
right?
And bang, and certainly, I'm sure, like us, there are. Well, I won't speak for you, but I know for us, there are people a whole lot better equipped to do what we're doing than us. But we're here, so we're accepting the challenge.
Guys, you're doing an outstanding job. Outstanding. I'm so proud that there are people that believe in God, that are getting out there and they will speak the truth, and that's such a blessing. And actually, we're lacking in that in many areas. And so what you guys are doing is paving the way and being the torchbearer in the front.
Well, we appreciate
it surprised me that you guys may come against forces that may want to silence you. In other words.
Yeah, it's I'll use the word. I think it's the first time I've used this word. Is creepy at times, but that aside, what have you found in your research that would help our audience, enlighten our audience? For example, Chuck Missler talks, and I'm sure you've seen him. He talks about the Isaiah 53 prophecy, or the Bible code in Isaiah 53 Bible code.
Yeah.
What have you found, Mr. Wright, that would be applicable to our time, our day, our situation, whether it be America or Europe or wherever?
Right. That goes back to my point about going further than the Torah. God inspired holy men as He did. write his word. He gave them those words. So therefore, those words are holy and they're divine. I was telling you today about Isaiah 53, that if you read the plain text, and as a Gentile who has Yeshua, Jesus, you immediately know, even if you're not a scholar, that it's talking about Jesus. Most rabbis, if you talk to them about it, they'll give you 1,000 different interpretations of what Isaiah 53 is. Even to the point where there's some that won't even go there. They won't even talk about Isaiah 53. They don't want to address it. But if you look at it in code, it's very clear. It's talking about Jesus. As a matter of fact, the term that's in there is Yeshua is my name. And you can find the 40 people that were at the cross. You can find every detail about the crucifixion and the resurrection of our Savior in Isaiah 53. Not only that, but in Psalm 22. I was telling you that also today, that Psalm 22 is another place where you can find Jesus all over it. And I think he was giving us an indication of this on the cross when he said, Father, why have you forsaken me? And most people take that as Jesus was admitting that God had.
Okay, guys, you know how I get in debates on Facebook with the Muslims? One of their big arguments is when Jesus was on the cross and he said, Lord, why have you forsaken me? They say he was crying on the cross. But like this guy says here, he was fulfilling Psalms 22. And they don't like that when I tell them that, because it's true.
Turn his back. When that was not the case at all. I don't believe God ever turned away from his son.
Exactly.
I believe he was quoting from Psalm 22, which is the very first lines of that. Why hast thou forsaken me? And it explicitly talks about what happens on the cross. He was pierced in his hands and his feet. And so Jesus was really preaching from the cross.
Okay, all right. Which essentially validates
That's
the
right.
authenticity of the word, of the text. And I think people need to understand that there is a validation. And when you're looking to, for example, as I understand this, and I'll let you explain this, but the process in which you're involved, you're looking for sequential patterns, not randomness, but sequential patterns.
Right.
And also their placement to each other, words being placed. Okay.
Right.
It's important. So from this, and I won't even begin to say that I understand the process. You understand the process. You're looking for patterns. What kind of patterns have you found here?
Well, what you're initially describing there is some of the methodology that the rabbis have established based on experiments. And you got to understand, guys, Gladerson even admitted this on camera, that from one year to the next is like being in kindergarten and the university in the next year. That's how much they have learned about it. There's a lot of speculation on their parts, but for the most part, the science is there and it's real. There is a connection to proximity and smallest skip. That is what they hold themselves to be, the backbone of a predictive code. This is working from that perspective that codes are for predicting. I don't believe they are. There's a lot of Kabbalism from these rabbis that they try to apply that contradicts really God, to be quite honest. That's why there's things that are hidden from them. Now, what I've found is that there's much that they're not saying, because I've found interactions between words and verses that have a meaning. Sometimes you'll see what I call conjunction or convergence of a word in ELS form, and then it will share a letter of the same word in a plain text. And to me, that looks suspiciously put there. Also, when you find things at right angles, to each other, if it comes together at a 90-degree angle or crossing over, just things stand out that doesn't seem normal. You know what I'm saying? And then when you research it a little further, then you begin to find out that each letter that passes through a verse has a connection to it. In the last table that I did before the conference about the tetrad, The name Obama had an interaction with the word abomination with the Vav, which that's not by accident, guys. That's not random.
I think
the rest that came out of that was
tables.
Yeah.
I think you have.
I think yeah.
Okay, so explain to the audience and to me, what does that mean? Obama, abomination,
exactly.
And
I think it's stating something, brother. To tell you the truth, we were talking earlier today. The purposes for it, and you're right. I think it's for confirmation, validation. I think it's for calibration. There's so many opinions on prophetic verses or interpretations. The bottom line is, what does God mean? What does He mean by this? And I think the encoded text says it all. It doesn't matter what these dime store prophets on every corner who have an interpretation that they form to their agenda. But what does God mean? So.
Okay, guys, I might bail out on these guys here. I didn't know the screen was going to be frozen. So people are dropping in and then dropping out really quick because they can't watch it. So I might do something else. We'll do this one.
Hey, welcome to Hagmann. Did I do something wrong here? No, okay. I had to double check to make sure I was on. Welcome to Hagmann. It's the Hagmann Report, where truth can't be silenced. And I am so fortunate to have with me, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most distinguished gentlemen walking the planet today. He's got, if I read his entire bio, we'd still be here tomorrow. I've met this gentleman. I'm not sure he remembers me. I met him in Florida a number of years ago. And you talk about one of the most intelligent people that I've met. It's Mr. Gary Stearman. Now, I want to bring something up here because for his, and folks, Gary Stearman, prophecywatchers.com, and you can find his bio, prophecywatchers.com/Gary Stearman. But in fact, the link will be in the program description box. But listen to this, okay? Listen to this. I grew up in the world of flight, aircraft design, and an airport culture, okay? From childhood, my expectation was that I would study engineering, which he later did, by the way, and learn to fly. Wow. And during his youth, the world included being in the company of men who operated government research and development programs, some of which were highly classified. Oh, yes, folks, there are those out there. And in their conversations, they also spoke of having experienced the reality of mysterious aerial phenomena, UFOs, aliens, strange craft, supernatural, natural. He wondered, he said. Okay, now, while in engineering school, he felt called to try his skills as a writer, so he added studies in linguistics, language, including, I will say, Greek and literary analysis. Oh, how important that is. I opened the show today talking about language, but I digress. There, he said he honed his research skills that would later take him into the deeper studies of scripture. And this is where the two things kind of mesh together. And though he had not been raised in the gospel and at that point had never received Christ. So that's kind of the backdrop in which we find ourselves. And again, we're talking with Gary Stearman, prophecywatchers.com. And here to take this forward from here, because folks, in under 40 days, there's going to be a conference in Branson. And my commitment to you, the viewer and listener, to bring people on through Steve that are going to be the keynote speakers there, the speakers there to talk about things like this in greater detail, but at least you get a taste. You get some sense of what the information is going to be. I don't want to drag this on too much any further, actually. So with me, I have, again, the very distinguished Mr. Gary Stearman and the additionally very distinguished, not extinguished, but distinguished Steve Quayle. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please, my man, take this and let's talk. Steve?
Well, fortunately, people are going to have the treat because I've been interviewed by Gary so many times, and I think this is probably the first time we, Doug, get to actually share with him, share with the listening audience the vast knowledge and research that Gary has dove into, and let's just say saturated himself with. And so it's a treat. Gary will be the keynote speaker Saturday night at Branson, Missouri, the 13th through the 15th of September. We've got a couple hundred spots open for people to register to come and hear all the great speakers in person. But where Gary brings to the table, not only being the oldest and wisest, and I told him, I don't tease him, I said, man, I wish I look as good as you do at your age as I do at 60, as I look not good at 68. The bottom line is that there's no one closer to the reverse engineering, his family. I'll let him tell the story. And I've asked Gary to share with you some tidbits. One of the most amazing stories he's going to tell about a UFO incident that most people don't even recognize. And, you know, he's privy to the information on it. So, Gary, hey, thank you. What a treat it is for me to have you. And thank you so much. And Bob Ulrich for your just amazing cordiality when I was with you guys in, Oklahoma, and also the fantastic talk we had. Doug, Gary and I could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I don't believe that's an embellishment. Is it, Gary? Go ahead, sir.
No, and by the way, with Steve, it's always hard to get a word in edgewise, but I managed to do it anyway, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think it's time for the Christian family to wake up, and I know you do too. And what do they need to wake up to? Well, they need to wake up to what their Bible actually says about dimensionality, hyperdimensionality, strange creatures who fly around the earth, who actually are capable of interdimensional travel. And I'm speaking, of course, of demons, devils, the devil himself. And we've kind of mythologized him, and we've turned him into a paper tiger. But he roams the earth. He's called the Prince of the Power of the Air. He appears, and his cohorts appear in the night sky, and everybody says, oh, look, it's a UFO. Well, years ago, too many years ago to count, that explanation simply did not ring true with me. And the church in which I was raised didn't answer the questions I was asking. I once asked, why don't we see angels anymore? And I was told, well, Gary, and this is when I was a teenager, I suppose. Gary, they don't appear anymore. They're real, but God has a different plan, and so forth and so on. And yet, in common reading, in common conversation, the subject of supernatural beings came up over and over again in my early life, and I knew there had to be an explanation. The explanation, of course, for what is commonly called UFOs is a war that's continuing in the heavens as we speak. And we see the, if you will, the shrapnel, the broken parts and pieces. And I'm thinking, for example, of that pasture down in Texas, or over in New Mexico. There's another pasture. This one I'm speaking of is north of Dallas, and there's another pasture over near Roswell, where all kinds of parts and pieces were found. And what could those have to do with angels and demons? Well, everything, as you know, Steve. And so this is kind of what drives me, is to merge the gospel and the truth of the Bible and Bible prophecy with scientism and pseudoscientism as people try to either explain or explain away UFO phenomena.
Well, and I think that you nailed it. And this is something that we're trying, Gary. You're trying at Prophecy Watchers. I'm trying. We're all trying who are dealing with these subjects as authors, researchers, to get the Christians ready for the greatest deception in the history of the world that's now coming forth, even from the military that denied all of the UFO findings for all these years. So if you would be so kind, share. First question I want to have for you before we go into anything is your opinion of the Navy's footage. All of the, everything's breaking now. Even the head of NASA about close to 6-8 months ago made the statement they're going to find life on Mars. He's not talking about microbial life, but will you share, please, at this point, the rush to disclose and as it applies to the end times, because they want to get their dialogue out, and what you and I and others are doing, all the researchers that we basically, you interview, I interview, or we talk together, we're trying to beat them to the punch, and that's for the sake of the mental health and the total salvation, too, of Christians that have lived in denial or will be destroyed. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, as you know, the expectation in the heart of the average 30-year-old today has been very carefully conditioned through movies, books, cultural exchanges, texting and Skyping. The mythology has grown and grown and grown, and Hollywood is cranking out movie after movie to explain to us where all these strange creatures have come from. And you know, and I know that's a false myth. And so where do we start? We go back, I go back to my early childhood and teenage years when I literally grew up around a family of aeronautical engineers who worked with aircraft companies like Beech and Cessna and Boeing and Stearman aircraft products, which, by the way, still exist to this very day, began life back in the 30s with the old biplanes. And believe me, engineers are no-nonsense people. And I've known lots and lots of aeronautical engineers. And if you listen to them long enough, they start to exchange stories. They start to say, oh, you know what? I heard something about an encounter a pilot had with something that nobody understands. And then the next story comes, and the next, and the next. And I've told you, Steve, that the dinner table conversation around the Stearman table was really interesting when I was growing up. And as an early teenager and mid-teenager, I began hearing stories about one in particular, crashed UFOs. And I'm not talking about Roswell. Roswell had already happened, and everybody had mythologized it to some degree at that point in time. But then, again, around the old Stearman dinner table, there was talk of another crash in Colorado. This one, even more spectacular than the one in Lubbock, not Lubbock, but Roswell. And I can provide a lot of detail and will at the conference of what they found at the Colorado UFO crash, which, by the way, nobody's ever read about that I know of. But I have seen and heard and talked with the actual participants in the exploration team that went in and looked at the crash. So that's one thing I'll be talking about.
Well, I think, too, we'll just wet their whistle. The viewers to Hagmann's report right now, Doug's report, is that it was an alien craft. There were alien bodies. The area was secured. And it's one of the most astonishing stories. Why do you think that one is just in the background? And maybe it's because of God's timing through you that it's brought out. But that makes Roswell look like a chicken feed. And look at the whole world that's grown up around Roswell. And I think the other things that you're going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, it's hard to blow my mind, but the nice thing about being around Mr. Stearman is that he succeeds. And we basically, I want you to understand something. I'm starting to grin because I know the rest of the story, but some of the stuff he'll be sharing is mind-boggling. So that's enough to wet their whistle. But I also want you, if you would, to discuss because of your families, obviously Stearman Aviation, the reverse engineering, and some of the things that you'll be speaking about from a perspective of someone who's totally in the aeronautics world, but also that as engineers, I have a son who's an engineer, and engineers are engineers. They deal with facts, numbers, formulas, everything. And the bottom line is that those guys aren't given to soliloquy or expectation or long philosophical dissertation. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hard rocks, nuts and bolts, and just the facts, and that's what they're interested in. And you ask a question: why was this particular event not publicized like the Roswell event was? And I think the answer is this was about 5, 6 years after Roswell. And I think by this time they had perfected their cleanup. They had anticipated something like this happening again. And when it happened, they were ready. And nobody ever heard a thing about it. And I know very little about it, but I do know enough to share. And it does add to the broad picture of what's going on. I guess here's a question, Steve, and you've dealt with this, I've dealt with it. These little guys are masquerading as space aliens who came from, who knows, Epsilon Eridani, or some exotic star system far, far away. And yet you and I both know that they don't come from some star system far, far away. They're interdimensional. They're spoken of in the Bible as angels and demons, and they're constantly working at some task or other to try to befuddle the plan of God. And if you go back to Greco-Roman history, the Greeks spoke very, very much at length concerning the work that these little guys were doing. And it's astonishing if you go back, for example, read the histories of Hesiod. He describes what we would call UFO aliens in great detail. And he says that, hey, the demons are our friends, and we should play up to them and develop a relationship with them, and they will bless us if we do. And so you can go back as far as you want. You can go back to Abraham and his battle in Genesis 14 with the 4 kings. When the giants show up, and there's a tremendous, I would call it a world war that was waged at that time. And when the giants show up for the battle, and other elements, we can call supernatural, show up in the battle scene, we're looking at exactly the same thing in the life of Abraham as we were looking at in 1947.
Actually, that's a typo. I was going to do Jonathan Kahn Harbinger tomorrow, but after what Diane just posted, I don't think I should. So I'm going to find something else to do, which I'll do.
And in 1954, and on and on and on, creatures that used to be called mythical are now being spoken of as space travelers, visitors.
And this is something that's critical, and this is why Branson is so important. Gary, you and I, even on your show, that thank you for having me on, but we talked about there's certain content that can only be revealed as the context of time will frame it, because you mentioned all the things, everything from video games, Hollywood, every form of technology, mind control, subliminal thoughts being placed in. But given the fact that mythology, that as King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun, for that which will be, has already been. So
Yes.
As someone who studies a lot of mythology, legends, and it's just like the little creatures, when I wrote the book, Little Creatures, it was because even when we're in the Solomon Islands, I didn't go there, a film team went there, and we go to Hawaii, the Menehune, we go to Thailand, the Nari Ponds, they're talking about little creatures. But you know what's interesting? One of the quotes that I found is they literally declare themselves to be the spawn of the fallen one.
Okay, thanks, Diane. I'll do that.
One. So the fact that, these little gray demons, and I tell people, you really think those entities that are supernaturally evil are gods, are creators, when they come here and fool around with the human reproductive system, and they're always abducting, or they're probing, or they're extracting, or false memories. And now we know that not only false memories, but they can erase memories, just like the Men in Black. And so what's interesting, Gary, is that the timing of Branson could not be more, I would say this, divine. That's not because we're throwing it on, I'm throwing it on, and we all collectively are speaking. It's because when Jesus said, Satan, get thee behind me, that means follow after me. So it's interesting, concurrent with the Branson coming up and all of the revelation coming to the different speakers, and not all of them, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, are Christians, but they're the key researchers in the world. So to dismiss men or women who are not Christians, but they're some of the brightest people in the world, and they have real life encounters, you basically cut yourself off from sources. So Gary, again, share a little bit more what you're going to talk about at Branson, because you give, I would say this, of anybody I know, this is not flattery. If anybody I know, you have the best start to finish, I would say, bracket from beginning to end, especially as it relates to aliens, fallen angels. And I think people lose track. Fallen angels, these aren't cavemen, or they're not cherubs that sit on the mantelpiece. And that even prehistory, prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. So if you want to even touch on a little bit of the pre-Adamic world, because I find there's so much war in, quote, professing Christendom, they will not embrace that thought.
Well, first of all, I just want to ask everybody a question. And this is the question I think every Christian should ask him or herself. And that is, do angels have technology? Simple question.
Yes.
But believe me, it's an important question, because we've all been raised, and I think the church has been reared to suppress anything that suggests that God has any sort of technology, that his cherubs, that his seraphs, that the angels on high, the throne guardians, the guardians of the various regions of heaven and earth, well, they do what they do by, I guess, what we might call higher knowledge, or maybe magic. But I ask the question again, do angels have technology? And I believe with all my heart that yes, angels have incredible technology. And if you know how to read the Bible, and if you know how to watch what the angels are doing, and I'm talking about the good guys, the angels that did not rebel, the way they behave is very logically, rationally, if you will, technologically. They go about in chariots. Well, what's a chariot? I don't know what an angelic chariot would look like, except maybe I do. Maybe I'm going to share that at your meeting in September, because I think I have great insight into what those chariots of the angelic realm look like. And believe me, they are high tech beyond your wildest dreams. Well, if the good angels have technology, what about the bad angels? Do they have technology? And there we come to an excellent question, because the guys in Roswell, the guys that crashed in Colorado that I'm going to tell about, they had an incredible technology, which, by the way, has been somewhat pirated by a number of research labs in the years since 1948. And we're talking about all the major research labs, IBM and Bell Labs, Lockheed in California, which, by the way, has the skunk works. And where do you suppose they got all their good ideas? So, this to me is the center of the story, and it brings the Bible into the 21st century. The Bible is not some archaic, crinkly old book that you just read on Sunday. The Bible is the handbook and the guide for planet Earth.
And I think that the technology issue is really important. One of the things that I believe that, and I was told this by multiple witnesses, from intelligence people, guys who want to clear their hearts, clear their conscience, and they come to Jesus, and they want people to know. But the special operations world of every major country is looking for the ancient technology. They're looking for the ancient math. They're looking for the secret, if you will, arcane, occult, and hidden secrets. And that's what the mystery schools are all about. And we know from the book of Revelation that Satan is going to utilize that technology to deceive, to seduce, and destroy. And that's why it's so important that people do understand that they do have technology.
G'day, boss.
And
Good to see you, mate.
You know this in reading the, if you will, the Golden Age mythology. Atlantis was destroyed when they started tampering with the human genome and mixing it with animals. And now we got CRISPR technology, and we got all these things. And technology cannot save people any more than a political process will. But, share some of the fascinating ancient technology, if you want to just touch on it, because we got to cover a lot of stuff in an hour.
Well, in the analogs of Plato, there are a number of references to ancient technology. One of them is he talks about the ancient city of Atlantis, which had a lighting system. And he mentions that it operated on some form of copper alloy. And the copper alloy that, well, no one really knows what the alloy was. He refers to it in the Greek as he's talking about Atlantis, but he's very clearly talking about a city that is powered by some kind of technology. Well, who built the city? Well, according to Plato, Atlas built the city. He was one of the fallen ones who came down from the heavens. He took an earthly wife, and he immediately began to build a circular city, which is it was a series of concentric rings, apparently somewhere on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea, or what we call the Mediterranean Sea right now. And boats came and went into the city of Atlantis. And
okay, we now know they found Atlantis. It's the eye of the Sahara, in the Sahara Desert. We learned that from Now You See TV about 2 weeks ago. Remember that, guys?
this was the ruler of Atlantis, and
Very
it was
convincing.
a high-tech city. Well, where did Atlas come from? He was fathered through an earth woman by the god Poseidon. At least that's what is told to us by a very reliable writer by the name of Plato. And he tells it as though it's the true story. He's not making up a story. He's just saying, listen, this is what used to happen. And although we have forgotten much of many of the features that made Atlantis work, I can tell you about a few of them. And of course, the one that intrigues me is this copper alloy they had at Atlantis that generated some form of energy that was able to light up the city. And I find things like that amazingly interesting.
Well, the other thing Atlantis was known for was basically its death rays.
Okay, do you remember Now You See TV done a video on where Atlantis is, and it was the Eye of Sahara, and they showed a clip, and it's definitely Atlantis. So I done that about 3 weeks ago, I'm thinking. You don't remember that?
Harnessing the sun's rays, and obviously you're talking about lighting up. Well, I would say this, the other names for Atlantis vary, and there are other, ancient antediluvian civilizations. But what was interesting about Atlantis is the same style of that, the way the city is laid out, interestingly enough, is in Gath. When they found Gath, the city of Goliath, in the background, did you see the layout of that circular area? I think it's in Israel too, but I forget the name of it. But what's interesting, if you look at that, it's almost a blueprint for Atlantis. So, and the Basques, the Basques in Spain consider themselves to be the descendants of the Atlanteans.
Yeah, and you're talking about Gilgal Rephaim in northern Israel.
Yes,
and you're right. It's shaped after the fashion of Atlantis. And the word Rephaim, of course, is used in the Old Testament many, many, many times, usually translated as angels, or fallen ones, or those residing in Hades waiting for judgment. But we know the Rephaim as giants. For example, Goliath of Gath was one of the Rephaim, and he had special features. A lot of people say they have a special level of intelligence that was higher than humankind, as well as being super strong and living extra long lives. But they're called the Rephaim, and the Old Testament is absolutely full of them, and they are always connected with megalithic structure, which, by the way, and you know this as well as I, if not better, megalithic structure could not be built by men today with their current technology, right?
It could not, especially like the stone of the pregnant woman in Baalbek, all of the antediluvian pre-flood structure. They defy even logic in the consequential sense. Some people say, well, they just poured it down in form of concrete and poured it in place. Well, then how do you account for the seams? You don't need those seams. And they're so irregularly shaped, that just doesn't make sense. But again, what's interesting, the Cyclops of Greek mythology were called belly hands, and they're attributed to the guys that created a lot of the underground tunnel systems. And all of the myths and legends about many of the islands in the Mediterranean are just filled with legendary, mythological. And here's the deal. The DNA extraction and looking for those things, these entities out there, they have to use mankind to open up the gates of hell, because God gave mankind prior to the fall dominion. So they use deception to get men to yield their deception, yield their place in God and their authority to make actually war on God's kids, his children. So, and even going back to the Vimanas of ancient India. So, you know, this warfare and technology is simply fascinating to me, because now we have all these special ops groups, and that's what I'm going to be sharing at Branson. No names, just like, you know, but the information. And I mean, it's staggering how much ancient technology, but they're always looking for it to either genetically super enhanced super soldiers, or weapon systems, or flying machines, aka flying saucers and Vimanas in the Hindu. So, I mean, you know, I'm excited, Gary. And number one, thanks for coming.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of great conversation there among people who gather to exchange ideas, and that's the beauty of all this. There'll be people like L.A. Marzulli, a good friend of mine, a good friend of yours. And L.A. is just a wealth of research accompanied by some very wise exploration. Let's put it that way. You know, he's always, as he says, on the trail. And you and I are on the trail too. Mine is a little different. I'm more housebound than people like L.A. Marzulli, who travel to the far-flung corners of the world. But I do a lot of reading. And one thing I wanted to mention is that I plan on emphasizing that the Bible is high tech. Please, folks, even if you read your King James Bible, and I've had the same King James Bible now for I cannot tell you how many years. It's a high-tech book. Paul writes about the prince of the power of the air, and he uses the Greek word air, which is spelled in Greek, alpha epsilon rho, but it's pronounced just like we pronounce air. But the Greeks said the air is from the ground to the top of Mount Olympus, which is, you know, roughly what, 8, 9, 10,000 feet. I'm not sure how high Olympus is, but that's the patrol zone of the prince of the power of the air, Satan. And then Paul says, you know what? He says,
I'll do the Atlantis one now, because I can come back to this one, guys. This one's still got half an hour to go. So while we're on the subject, let's check it out. There it is. Yeah, that's what I thought, Tricky. I'm the DJ, so I can play anything.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Who was able to make war with him?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to the Midnight Ride. My name is David Carrico, and it is my great honor to welcome all of you once again into the Puritan Barn to the Now You See TV studios.
Okay, I've got to get rid of the glare, guys. Because this, yeah, hang on.
Tonight, uncovering Atlantis, one of my favorite subjects, Atlantis. And tonight, John has some material that I guarantee is going to blow your mind. I don't care how much you've studied or looked at Atlantis. This is going to be frosty. I guarantee you. So get ready. It all starts right now, because we are now
live. What's up, guys? It's so good to be here again in the Puritan Barn with David Carrico, bringing you guys the Midnight Ride. I mean, this is the highlight of my week, and we appreciate you guys sharing that with us. You guys could be literally doing anything you want right now, but you're here with us, and we're so excited, and we're thankful for it. Let us know where you're from in the chat, and we would love to hear it. David, how has your week been?
It's been fantastic. It's just been great. We're just so thankful for everything the Lord's done, and just thankful, just thankful.
Yeah, man, it's been it's pretty amazing to walk his path and basically walking by faith, not by sight, because none of this can ever be foreseen. The kind of things that he has in mind for those that do his bidding, right? It's just pretty amazing. So with that being said, guys, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors tonight. Tonight, we're going to give a shout out to FOJC Radio. This is David and Donna's ministerial content that they've been doing for over 40 years, all put in together on one website, and you can check it out there. Lots of resources, FOJCradio.com. Also, sugarandspicesoap.com, sugarandspicesoapcompany.com. They have natural soaps that are just amazing, beautifully made, wonderful for gifts, wonderful for your own place. Also, just the fact that you can put stuff on your body without having to worry about harmful chemicals being added to
I haven't
those
got
things.
contrast
Not
setting.
have to worry about pig lard or anything like that, depending on who you are. I know for me, this is a huge thing for my family. And so having them as a sponsor is awesome. You can check it out. They have Midnight Ride soap just for you guys out there, Midnight Ride package. And anything you do order on there, use the coupon code NYSTV, and that'll get you 10% off any order that you do. Also, we want to give a big shout out to Watts Leather, making some amazing custom pieces for leather. Also, he has other pieces on his website too that are really.
It's not the contrast this time. It's at their end, because John here has got the glary face, but David's always got normal color. So it's their glare, because John here always has a glary face. So long as we can see the stencils they put up, that's what we've got to watch.
Cool that you can check out. But pretty much whatever you can think of to have done, he can do it. He's made amazing book covers for me for books that are pretty rare that I don't want to lose. He's made these covers that.
Yeah, not in the menu. There is no opportunity to go high or low on the contrast.
He can
I don't know why.
Over the top of these covers that make it look like they come out of an ancient library. Just amazing stuff. Really fantastic work. So check them out. Also, nystv.org, which is our website that has amazing content that you cannot find anywhere else, documentaries you can't find anywhere else. The Book of Enoch video commentary that myself and David are going through. David's leading us through the entire Book of Enoch. It is all right there, and there's other stuff that's been banned from YouTube that you can check out there. So we check that out. You use the code RIDER. It'll get you $8.99 off your first month. All the links to that are in the description. Also, a couple announcements that I want to make, and then David, I'll hand you the floor to make an announcement. In Florida, in Estero, Florida, which is Southwest Florida, around that area, we're having a meet and greet. And I'm going to be there. Nobody else from the team's going to be there to this one, but it'll be in Estero, and it's on the 25th of January. So the end of this month, I will be there. You can register for that. I don't have the links in the description right now, but I can put the links in the comment for those of you that would like to come and check it out. It's absolutely free, but I'd love to meet you guys. It's also a great way, if you're in the area, to meet people from your area that you can connect with that are similar minded in that area. We're also going to be doing one in Nashville the following month. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that information, because we'd love to meet you. The one in Nashville, it's going to be the whole team there. It's going to be really cool. And the one in Florida, I'm just really looking forward to it. There's people down there that we've never been that far south to meet, and I'm just totally excited about it. Also, Breaking Babylon coming up tomorrow night on Breaking Babylon YouTube channel, another live show going on at 6 p.m. Central Time. And David, you have also on FOJC Radio, there's a show going on too tomorrow night as well, right?
Yeah. After Breaking Babylon at 6, at 8 p.m. Central Time, you can go to FOJCradio.com. There's a link there to our Rumble channel.
I got the two cats right in front of me.
Stream of scratching the surface of the whole earth with Tracy Vinay. It is going to be good. I mean, it is just.
See, look at David's face. It's normal color with no glare. So I'm pretty sure John Pounder's lighting.
Really, some amazing stuff. So we're just thankful, and join us for that.
Yeah, man. Any other announcements before we get started on this? This is in this rabbit hole into the Atlantis underground.
Let's get after it.
All right, let's do it. So tonight, this show is talking about Atlantis Uncovered. Now, I was speaking to a friend of mine on the phone, and he was saying, look, man, there's this information, you have to check it out. There's this video, you need to look at it and see this because this is interesting when it comes to Atlantis. This is a possible location. It looks really possible that this is it. Now, Atlantis is one of these interesting subjects that's spoken about originally by Plato. And Plato's, I guess it was called the New Republic or the Republic. I can't remember. What is the name of that book, David?
Criterius.
Critias.
Criterius, I said that.
Critias and Timaeus. And in that book, he describes a city that he heard about secondhand. And in this city, it describes a city that never sleeps, a city that is constantly with commerce all the time. You know, it's not too far from the Pillars of Hercules. It describes what it looks like and all of these different things. Now, from this story, many things have been formed, many ideas, many things to look forward to for a civilization in the future. The ideas, even theosophy and different religions like that have integrated Atlantis into their stories since this. And the reason to me Atlantis is so intriguing is several reasons, but one of the reasons is the idea of the 10 kingdoms of Atlantis, the 10 kings of Atlantis, because in the scripture we find a kingdom having 10 kings that will return to face the world in combat, right? This is going to happen in the end times, and it's intriguing to me that a lot of the similarities in Atlantis have the similarities of a pre-Diluvian world that existed with a certain type of government that we will see again. And it's pretty interesting to me. I know, David, you said it's one of your favorite subjects as well.
It is, and we've done a lot of broadcasts. We've talked about the 10 kings, and we've got it in Daniel 7, Revelation 17. There's the 10 sections of America divided into the FEMA 10 sections. It goes on and on and on. And this is the origin of this whole 10 king scenario right here. This is where it began. It all stems from Atlantis.
Yeah, even Francis Bacon, which wrote a book called The New Atlantis, and in this book, it's just basically idolizing, I guess, just lifting up the idea of Atlantis and making a new civilization in comparison to the beauty and the unification of this golden state or golden island, I guess, that they describe it as.
Atlantis was the globalist utopia that the New World Order aspires to now.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm sure that we'll get to too is, in the Theosophical Society, there's two ways of looking at it. There's like the old style Theosophists and the new style Theosophists, but they both share this idea of this 7 root race theology, this idea of 7 root races, our ideology, these ideas of 7 root races that have existed throughout time, the Atlanteans being the root race that existed now before the present day root race, which is, according to them, the Aryan root race. But interestingly, human anthropology, all of the terms for our identity based on our race are based off of this idea of this 7 root race ideology, which I find super interesting to me, because the Atlanteans, the idea that they consider the Atlanteans a different root race than the root race that we're in right now says some pretty interesting stuff to me. I mean, these are the people that run our world, that believe these things.
Yeah.
So with that being said, there's a video that we're going to be checking out. It's called The Lost Roman Map Has Atlantis at the Eye of the Sahara, Africa. It's called the Richat Structure. Now, you guys are going to watch this video. It's going to be really interesting. To me, when I first saw the title of the video, I'm like, there's no way. This is ridiculous, right? It's not possible. It's in the middle of the Atlantic. It has to be. But when I watched this, it really was intriguing to me to what this all meant. And me and David we're going to watch this video. It's like 20-something minutes, but we're going to be pausing in between to make comments in between based on some of the information that we've learned over time about Atlantis too, just to kind of add to what is being said here. So we're going to start this video, check it out, and we will see you guys in the chat.
Hey, not going to see you, mate.
To discuss this with you guys. So here we go.
In this video, I'm going to share several astonishing new details that have come to light involving the topic of the lost ancient city of Atlantis and the Eye of the Sahara, which in just the last few years has taken the internet by storm, as this unbelievably bizarre structure just so happens to match a dozen of the most significant similarities to Plato's description of the famed lost capital city of Atlantis. But perhaps the only thing stranger than these striking comparisons is the fact that the Richat structure itself remains a genuine scientific mystery that continues to confound scientists to this day, as this one-of-a-kind geological feature is like no other place found anywhere else on Earth and has remained essentially hidden and largely unknown within the remote Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania, which only makes its distinctive nature that much more curious when you consider that so few people have still...
Hang on, guys. It's doing a glary thing again, is it? No, it's not. Okay.
Ever seen or heard of it before, even including the most curious and inquisitive minds around.
But let me ask you this, Joe, real quick. When you saw my video, was that the very first time you had ever seen this thing before?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that is the thing, because if nothing else, this extraordinarily unique anomaly should be included on the list of natural wonders of the world. But nevertheless, when you see the new lines of evidence that I'm going to share in this video, it will become exceedingly apparent that the fittingly named Eye of the Sahara is by far the most likely location for the lost capital city of Atlantis. And not only that, these new details will likely make those who previously thought that this site could not possibly be the location of Atlantis think again. So with all of that said, let me start off by sharing something particularly interesting. It is widely known that the ancient Romans were renowned for documenting everything, as the Caesars went to profound extent to accumulate knowledge and information from every location their vast empire ventured. So I have to admit that I was quite surprised to learn of someone by the name of Pomponius Mela, who was the Romans' first geographer dating back to some 2,000 years ago, and had created a sophisticated map of the known world at that time, titled The Habitable World of Pomponius Mela, something that up until recently I had never seen or heard of before. And real quick, let's not confuse this map with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus' map of the known world of 2,500 years ago, which I shared in one of my prior videos on this topic. A map that curiously listed Atlantis in the same location of the Richat.
Wow.
However, the original source of this map is a bit of a mystery, as modern historians claim that Herodotus is not known to have ever created an actual map and have thus put its origins into question. So, putting that map aside, let's focus on this verifiably authentic 2,000-year-old map that has also annotated something very interesting in the Western Sahara Desert. First, notice that this map is oriented to the east in its original form, so let me go ahead and flip it to a north-south facing orientation so we can gain our bearing. And the features of Europe, West Asia, and North Africa become apparent. So let's now focus our attention to what is in the northwest region of the Sahara and observe what it annotates here. Atlantia, or Atlantiae, which more or less appears as Atlanteans, and again, in the same geographical region of the Richat structure, which, like I've shared in my prior videos, just so happens to coincidentally match so many precise details that Plato described of Atlantis, including that the capital city was famously said to be made up of concentric circles, specifically 3 rings of water and 2 of land, which correctly matches the Richat with water in it, which it certainly did, as I will prove to you with hard scientific data in just a moment. But the circular ring city was also said to have an opening to the sea at the south, which not only matches the southerly opening of the Richat anomaly, but it even has existing evidence of a flow of salt water that is still visible to this day, which, and again, I will prove with hard scientific evidence shortly. But Atlantis was also said to be surrounded by a large...
All right, David, I'll pause it for you there.
Okay, now, the visual there is just stunning. It's just absolutely stunning. And one of the objections that people might have in their mind would be that desert's real dry. You know, how in the world could that have been flooded and submerged underwater? And Robert Schluck of Boston University has done a lot of research, to me, that's just absolutely convincing, where he put forth his argument that the Sphinx has water erosion. And this is something that Graham Hancock, Nathaniel West, and all of the researchers into Egypt that aren't buying the party line have agreed that this is indeed legitimate. Another thing that I remember that is evidence of an ancient cataclysm in this area, a little I believe it would be to the north in the Sahara, in the Libyan
Oh
part
man,
of the
this
Sahara Desert.
bloody
They found green glass.
focus.
And for sand to be heated to the temperature to where it would turn green like this glass there, the scientist says it would take nuclear fission to do that.
Wow.
And there's gobs of this glass you can just go pick up in the Libyan area of the Sahara Desert. And a lot of scientists, they just say the only thing could have caused that would be a nuclear explosion. So there is a lot of evidence that we talked about on previous shows on ancient technology that would validate the possibility of what this fellow is saying as being true.
Yeah, man. I just recently watched an interview with a guy named Graham Hancock, and I know you know who he is, but a lot of people are starting to know a little bit more about him. You know, of course, we've been reading.
Guys, I'm trying to get the glare right.
He speaks kind of a contrarian view to all of these structures that most people do, and it's not contrarian to what we believe about it, but it's contrarian to what most evolutionist scientists and archaeologists would say actually existed on these planes. But you know, the idea that this technology existed that's different than our technology is probably 100% accurate. I mean, you had civilizations that existed for thousands of years.
Too
You look at our
glary, look.
civilizations when we actually started getting technology, and we haven't been really existing that long when our technology just started booming all of a sudden, right? And he brought up the idea that if their technology went down maybe a different path, instead of using some of the energies that we use now, they use different energies such as vibration energy or such as static electricity and all these different kinds of energies rather than lithium, rather than gasoline, rather than all that. Their technology would be something we wouldn't even fully quite understand, but yet would be maybe as advanced or more advanced than what we actually have right now. So
like the free energy concepts of Tesla.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll continue this video here.
Rectangular plane, which is another arguable similarity that extends for hundreds of miles on both sides of the Richat. But furthermore, Atlantis was said to be made of black, red, and white color stones, which is another specifically unique similarity that matches the geological nature of the Richat. And speaking of uniquely specific geological features, this next detail that I recently learned of blew me away, as there is English literature from the year 1851 on the preliminary treatise of resources of ancient Mauritania, which describes the country as having gold in considerable quantities, and even specifically states, and I quote, that it is a well-authenticated fact that previous to the discovery of America, Europe was supplied to a great extent with gold from Mauritania. How have I never heard of this before? And get this, Mauritania was so rich in gold that several hundred years ago, a king by the name of Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which was a region of Africa that includes modern-day Mauritania, was said to have been the richest man in all of human history. So rich that he far exceeds the richest billionaires alive today. In fact, he owned gold mines which account for more than half of the world's supply of gold today. And by the way, something else you'll find interesting related to that 1851 treatise of ancient Mauritanian resources is that it describes ancient Mauritania of having an abundance of elephant ivory. It's a significant detail considering that Atlantis was said to have numerous elephants on the island. And so it's worth mentioning that there is also existing cave art depicting elephants in the area around the Richat as well, as I've shared previously. But I digress because another highly specific feature of Atlantis was that its center island was described as being geothermal in nature, and that it was said to have hot springs as well as springs of cold, fresh water, which is a reason why some have dismissed the dry, barren Richat structure as a possibility for Atlantis. So I imagine that many will find it very interesting to learn that there is a little-known study of the Richat structure dating back to the late 1990s, which describes the Richat as being a hydrothermal complex. Well, hot springs themselves are the very definition of a hydrothermal anomaly. And the fact that there's an actual scientific study corroborating this uniquely specific characteristic is significant in itself, because although the Richat may be a dry, barren place today, we must imagine what a different landscape this region was some 11 to 12,000 years ago at the time of Atlantis. And speaking of 11 to 12,000 years ago, this is the part in the video where things get crazier and will continue to do so through the rest of the video.
Good.
Because another key aspect is that Atlantis was described as having impressive mountains to the north. So, assuming that the cliffs of the Adra Highlands don't already meet that description, there is likewise a massive mountain chain to the north called the Atlas Mountains, which were aptly named after the first known king of Mauritania, who, get this, just so happens to share the same exact name of the very first king of Atlantis, who was also named Atlas. Gee, what a coincidence. But it only gets more bizarre from here, because not only was the city of Atlantis described as having mountains located to the north, but also said to have rivers. So get this. Recent scientific studies have confirmed an ancient river called the Tamanrasset that flowed from the Atlas Mountains and winded some...
Pause it for just a second. I wanted to talk about something here. It's interesting. They talk about Atlas and they talk about Poseidon and the idea that, you know, this was set up by these so-called deities. Of course, we did a show talking about the return of the ancient gods, how a lot of them were just men idolized years later as being gods. But in this area here, it talks about someone like Poseidon. Now, in when we did the show on the Anunnaki, which was a show that I think a few weeks ago we did, and we talked about this in their books. There was a fish-like deity that came out of the water and kind of helped produce these civilizations. And we have this similar story here in this area, which, you know, even leads me more to believe the theory that, you know, what we see post-flood as far as Nephilim go might actually be hybrids, fish-human hybrids that were able to survive, because the Bible does say that all everything that breathed air
can't get it square
was
the
wiped out.
TV.
You know, that's one thing that very clearly in the King James Bible it says everything that breathed air was wiped out. But what about these hybrids that would have breathed, you know, water? They would have had used more gills to consume that. They would have been left alive. So it's interesting. Nonetheless, what do you think about that, David?
Well, it's amazing how this is going to dovetail into what I'll be talking about next week. But it just involves this concept of the hot springs.
Yeah.
And in the book of Enoch, in the very next episode we'll be taping, the book of Enoch claims that when angels are being punished, he describes it, they're basically being boiled in a mixture of molten metal and water, and that heats and it comes up to the surface as hot springs. And it talks.
Tricky, I'm not going to do that now because I might bugger it up and lose the stream. But when I hang up, you reckon I should turn the contrast down a bit? Yeah.
About it even having healing capacity from the hot springs in places where fallen angels were judged.
Wow.
So it's actually, if the book of Enoch is credible, and we believe that it is, where there are hot springs, it is possible that this has been a site of an ancient judgment of fallen angels where they're actually being punished. So this, again, this whole concept.
Do you know what, guys? Before I was Christian, I thought Christianity be dead boring, but it's not. And I love the stuff like that's why I say wow, because I really get amazed. Because Christianity information, the deep stuff like this, it just makes you go wow.
Just, you know, we just get a little more credibility here as we go for this guy's argument.
Yeah, and you know, considering the possible timeline for when this place was, which they'll talk about a little bit in this video, I thoroughly believe this is an antediluvian civilization. You know, pre-diluvian, pre-flood diluvian civilization that existed. It's so interesting to see the remnant of what has been left behind, because even the pyramids could be much older than what we understand.
Yeah.
Today. So.
Yeah. Another argument that Grant Hancock makes, and this is widely agreed to by a lot of researchers, is that about 11,000 BC, that there was a major global cataclysm about 11,000 BC.
Yeah.
And that could very well be what we're looking at here.
Very well could be. All right, we'll continue here.
500 kilometers all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, directly in the path of the Eye of the Sahara. And if that isn't fascinating enough, just look at the date of when that river is known to have existed. 11,700 years ago, precisely within the time frame of when Atlantis was said to have been destroyed. Make no mistake, the entire region of the Sahara looked completely different at that time compared to what we see today. And the next few details that I'm going to share may very well blow your mind. Because, like I've shared in multiple prior videos, there is tremendous evidence of vast water erosion throughout the Sahara Desert, which is so extreme that it can be clearly observed from space via satellite imagery. Make no mistake, this is not wind erosion and has been confirmed to be catastrophic levels of water erosion by subject matter experts, including even the respected Randall Carlson himself. And the overwhelmingly apparent water striations that rip right through the Richat structure all the way to the Atlantic Ocean are evident for all who have eyes to see. And upon further study, it looks as if an unimaginably massive force of water had blasted its way from the Mediterranean Sea through North Africa, creating a path that just so happens to be at all the lowest elevational points through the Sahara, just as water would naturally direct itself. And this is the part where things get really nuts, because there is a little known yet unbelievably fascinating scientific study that revealed a gigantic under-ocean seafloor slide off the coast of Mauritania and is referred to as the Mauritanian Slide, and dates back to approximately 11,000 years ago, give or take, and was, get this, believed to have been created by a tsunami. A tsunami that, given the very nature of its shape, would have originated from the east, as you can see from the debris field's widest point, and pushed westward to where the debris field eventually becomes more narrow. But not only that, this massive seafloor slide is located directly in front of the Richat's path, as you can see from the reference locations on the study when compared to the respective locations on planet Earth. And when I say that this seafloor slide is massive, observe the legend in the lower right. From my own estimation, it is 300 kilometers, or nearly 200 miles wide from east to west, and nearly 150 kilometers, or 100 miles wide, when measured from north to south. To put that east-west measurement into perspective, the debris field generated by this tsunami is more than 25% wider than the maximum width of Florida's peninsula. Another comparison is that it's virtually the same distance from Washington, D.C. to New York City. So the big question becomes, what on earth happened to send a biblical-sized tsunami, so to speak, through North Africa in the approximate neighborhood of 11,000 years ago? And let's be real. If the Richat structure is indeed the actual location for the lost city, the remains of it would be found.
Man, I can't get this going, guys.
Which, by the way, is stacked layer of debris sediment and is at least a couple thousand meters or more than a mile deep. This entire area needs to be scanned with LiDAR and even drilled for examination. Now, let me keep going, because this seafloor slide is not the only piece of evidence that suggests that the ocean bulldozed its way through the Sahara at the time of Atlantis, as the next detail I'm going to share is extremely significant. And I must first preface it by sharing a highly important detail that I've mentioned in prior videos, which is that the last time the Sahara was said to be under the ocean was at the time of the Trans-Saharan Seaway, which is estimated to have existed some 56 to 66 million years ago, essentially all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs. And you can distinguish the regions of the Sahara where this seaway is known to have once flowed. But here's the thing. You can also clearly observe that this seaway is not annotated to have went west over the Richat. Rather, it went south, which is why I suggest that something else happened, something separate and far more recently that has somehow eluded scientists and researchers. And here is the smoking gun evidence which proves it. Enicusi is the Sahara's largest volcano, reaching a height of 11,300 feet, or more than 3,400 meters, and is dated to be 2 million years old. And the last known lava flow occurred at the south end of Enicusi's caldera in the neighborhood of 12,000 years ago, give or take. And this is the part that is unbelievably significant.
Good to see ya.
Notice how the volcano is positioned directly along the clear path of catastrophic water erosion, just as we see as the Richat. You can literally see the line of the path that the water took, and which clearly eroded and erased portions of that 12,000-year-old lava flow, which means that the flooding would have had to have happened after that volcanic activity, Whether it be 12,000 years ago or 2 million years ago at the birth of this volcano, this is hard evidence that the ocean blasted its way through the Sahara far more recently than 56 to 66 million years ago that's been claimed. And the evidence does not stop there. Because this white blemish within Emikusi's caldera at 11,000 plus feet in elevation is not snow, it's salt. Salt that is said to be the rains of an ancient lake that disappeared just thousands of years ago. And not only that, small aquatic life, including gastropods, which consist of snails, slugs, limpets, and other small little creatures, have been found within the caldera and have been.
You know, it's interesting, David. All of these discoveries in the recent past and just recently have lended to such an idea of the timeline being changed. You know, they tout these years off of millions and millions of years and have no idea what they're saying. You know, they just make up these numbers, but more and more every evidence that we see points towards an Earth that is not 50 something million years old, points towards, you know, more recent times that all of these things happen. And, you know, for instance, we were talking about the water line on the Sphinx. I was in Utah around the Moab area where people like to go four-wheeler and Jeep riding and all that through there. And there's these mountains through there. And you can clearly see a line where water once existed in that area to where it was, you know, way high up, thousands of feet, over a mile high, you know, where water would have existed along the side of these mountain tops.
I think that's the best I'll get it, guys.
And it's amazing how they, you know, the Smithsonian, the education system, how they so firmly stick to this narrative of evolution and do anything they can to hide the actual facts from this, you know. And I look at the mythologies, you know, you see, like we just talked about, the fish man coming out of the water. Evolution's almost a humanistic idea of that, right? The fish coming to the water, turning into this, turning into that. But we see this similar story in mythology, but it involves more of a genetic manipulation type scenario that we see in the Bible. And the evidence just keeps coming out so much now. It's really hard for me to take seriously anybody that believes in these evolutionary ideas.
Yeah. And it's so sad that what these educational, and that's a poor term to call them, institutions do, they get their scenario and they get their timeline, and anything that does not fit with that is suppressed or ignored.
Yeah.
I mean, there's evidence, you know, there's no doubt that this area was at one time underwater, and just so much evidence in so many places that they will do everything they can to just disparage or cover up information that doesn't go along with the party line. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and one of the subject, like you're going to talk about next year in the Midnight Ride, some of the places that are proven to probably prove your point biblically. In Enoch, they've shut down. You can't even go to these areas, right? You can't even look and explore them. And you see all of these magazine or these newspaper articles of giants found, right? Even Abraham Lincoln talking about these giants.
Yeah.
But the bones are gone, right? Somebody took the bones and just disappeared them, you know, out of the blue. And we have this this narrative being pushed down, and there's so much evidence of them pushing this down. It's amazing that the masses haven't seen it yet, but it's right there in front of our faces.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's continue here. But this is just more proof, you know, seeing these fossils being found in this area. It's hard to deny the existence, even if this isn't Atlantis, the existence of some civilization being there getting wiped out by a great tsunami of some sort. It's pretty interesting.
Been radiocarbon dated to some 14 to 15,000 years ago. How did they get there, and where did that salt come from? Because make no mistake, this salt water would obviously had to have come after this volcano's eruption, certainly not before. So let me now take you back to the Richat structure so I can share one of the most significant details of this video, as it will prove that seawater was indeed inside the Richat at the exact time of Atlantis. Just as I've shared in other videos, all these white blemishes are indeed salt. In fact, the entire region around the Richat in Mauritania itself is known for vast amounts of salt that are mined and exported to this day. And when you consider that all the areas in and around the Richat with these concentrations of salt also happen to be in the areas of the lowest elevation, it seems reasonable to conclude that seawater had once settled and evaporated here. And this next part is the smoking gun evidence, as I have found another little-known study that shares how aquatic life, including mollusks, which, by the way, examples of mollusks include oysters, clams, mussels, squid, and even octopus, existed in the brackish waters within the wrist shot and have dates ranging from 15,000 to 7,700 years ago, which proves that the wrist shot was consumed with water at the very time of when Atlantis was said to have been destroyed 11,600 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment, as the implications are massive. And let me just say, if everything I've shared so far isn't compelling enough, wait until you hear these next several arguments. First, consider that the story of Atlantis actually originates from the ancient Egyptians, who claimed that they were colonists and the remaining survivors of a civilization that was destroyed in a cataclysm. And this is where the legend of Atlantis comes from, which is something that most people are not aware of. And so when you consider this next remarkable fact that was only discovered not long ago, is that the Sahara was a lush green tropical landscape at the time of Atlantis. And considering that Atlantis was said to be abundant in exotic fruits and vegetation and had lush hanging gardens, when you piece together the fact that the Sahara was a known lush tropical environment at that time, only further adds to these possible similarities. And listen to this. The Green Sahara existed up until approximately 5,000 years ago, when it shifted to the barren desert we know it for today. However, some estimates state that this transition may have happened as recently as 4,500 years ago, which is a curious time frame, as it precisely coincides with the estimated date for when the pyramids of Giza were constructed, some 4,500 years ago. And that brings me to another curious observation, which is that the notable Egyptian Eye of Horus is uncannily similar to the Eye of the Sahara when observed from altitude. Of course, many will consider this comparison to be a stretch. However, it certainly has a thought-provoking resemblance, does it not? But that aside, and although the Sahara Desert initially seems like the least likely place that you'd find the lost city of Atlantis, it actually makes a lot of sense when you piece together other key details. For example, Atlantis was said to be busy all day and all night, rich in trade, and with people speaking languages from all over. So ask yourself, does it really make sense to suggest that a city so vastly consisting of travel and trade would be located in the middle?
Interestingly, that, you know, David, just pausing up that part right there where it talks about it being a place with all different languages and all people was just basically hopping all night. This is the I guess the dream, right? This was the dream of Francis Bacon. This was the dream of the founders of our country, for this to be the new spot that the whole world came to all the time. Yeah. And I think that it's amazing to me, honestly, that Plato, his word on this place has just really spurred so much study, so much archaeological research. People have been searching for this place for hundreds of years, you know, based on a line out of Plato's book that he had, you know, a paragraph. It's pretty.
And Plato was the man. He had the sources. He talks about Solon, the Egyptian priest that opened up to him the Egyptian archives. And also, not long ago, we were talking about on the 7 names of Solomon, how that it is believed that the lost writings of Solomon, some of them found their way to Aristotle and Plato. So Plato was very much in a position to know of what he spoke.
No doubt about it.
Of a vast, dangerous ocean. I mean, would other less advanced seafaring civilizations venture out to the middle of the ocean to hit up a local market to trade for ripe fruit, spices, and vegetables? Or is it far more likely that, based on all the new scientific data that we have, that the region of North Africa, which we now know was connected by a diverse, massive net?
Okay, that was a bit of a weak argument. They're saying if Atlantis is in the middle of Atlantic Ocean, would people go all the way to the middle of Atlantic Ocean just to get spices and things like that? Well, they done that with the Silk Road that led to China. So yes, they're willing to go to great lengths to get spices. So he's sort of wrong there.
Of rivers, which of course are conducive for travel. Wouldn't that be more feasible? I mean, after all, new studies involving lost human civilizations of the Sahara have concluded exactly that. And something else worth mentioning is that Atlantis was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms, and I would not be surprised if any of the other 9 that made up this empire would be found in the island chains found in this region, including the submerged islands such as the Azores. I am simply focusing on the capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles. And the Eye of the Sahara is the one location that matches that highly specific characteristic, and nearly a dozen others. Heck, even the names are still the same. Now, if everything I've shared so far isn't compelling enough, the next few details will hit the nail into the coffin that the Eye of the Sahara is by far the most likely location for the lost capital city of Atlantis. Because many have argued that since the Richat structure is a, quote, natural formation, it could not possibly be the location since, after all, Atlantis was created by the god Poseidon. But when you consider that Poseidon was the god of the sea, water, horses, and earthquakes, the Greek word Poseidon itself translates to, quote, husband of the earth or lord of the earth. It seems to me that this is a lost in translation phrase that is meant to describe what we call today Mother Nature, which, if you ask me, would of course make the most sense. But besides that, we also know that humans have built upon the most unique natural formation since the beginning of time and still do to this day. Furthermore, people will also say that Plato stated that Atlantis was located, quote, west of the Pillars of Hercules, which we now know today as the Strait of Gibraltar, which is why many suggest that Atlantis would most likely be found in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. However, Plato did not say west. He actually said in front of. And the first thing you should know is that when you exit the Strait of Gibraltar, the current takes you directly south towards the Richat. But furthermore, assuming that a distant past civilization even had adequate seafaring vessels that could survive the open oceans, you had essentially 3 choices of travel when leaving the straits. You either follow the coast to the right, follow the coast to the left, or go straight into the unknown, endless ocean horizon at your own peril. So here is something interesting to think about. If you traveled along the coast with Africa to the left, you would journey west-southwest for more than 1,200 miles before rounding Africa's Western Sahara coastline. To put that distance into perspective, that is equivalent from New York City to Lincoln, Nebraska. That is no little trip. I point that out because it's not unreasonable to say that the Richat structure is in front of the straits when you travel by boat. But regardless, Plato never said west. And by the way, another detail people get caught up in is that Plato stated that Atlantis sank beneath the waves, which is why many have long assumed that Atlantis would be at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. However, Plato also described that the destructed area of Atlantis following the cataclysm consisted of reeds of grass, and that the area was no longer navigable by ship as it was blocked by a barrier of mud. Well, that does not indicate anything about being at the bottom of the ocean. Rather, he is essentially describing reed-filled salt marshes that are known to exist in shallow coastal regions. And although the Richat is now some 1,200 feet above sea level, we know that that, of course, was not always the case, considering that the sea life once existed in the Richat some 11 to 12,000 years ago. But
you know, it's interesting. It talks about like a slide of land coming in. You know, we studied Tartaria, the mudflood idea, the idea of this, and we've seen evidence that there have been these type of things and cities built on top of cities.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. I would give almost anything other than, you know, like somebody I love in order to have the opportunity to spend, I don't know, tons of, you know, man hours and money digging in that area just to see what's there.
Yeah, that's what I would say. If I was a billionaire, I'd be financing some exploration there.
Yes.
To find out. Sure would.
No doubt. And you know, all of this stuff is so intriguing. I wonder how much has been covered up of all this stuff. And I know that we've studied just more recent kind of history and the idea of a big cover up happening in our own country of information covering up happening through orphanage, through asylums, through cover ups of slides of land and all of that. And I just wonder how much of this is going to show up this year. I mean, just so many things are showing up. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah. And another thought, the fellow that's called the father of Egyptology, Athanasius Kircher, the Jesuit, and he's also responsible for creating some false timelines dates in Egyptian chronology, according to Velikovsky and others. But he drew the map that pictured Atlantis in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
Could that have been for the purpose of misdirection?
Possibly.
Because he certainly knew Egypt.
Yeah.
And, that's another possibility. A little misdirection there, perhaps, for the good Jesuit fellow.
Oh, yeah. You can expect that from them, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they do.
It's not too far-fetched, that's for sure. So we'll continue here.
This is why it is worth discussing the geological phenomenon known as isostatic response or glacial isostatic adjustment, which describes that when ice melts, the significant reduction in weight causes the land to lift back up, but subsequently causes land in other areas to decrease, which is the likely explanation for the sunken Azore Islands, as it's been suggested that the melted North American ice shelf caused that land to lift and subsequently caused the land in the Atlantic Ocean to sink. But if that is indeed the case, would that not potentially have caused North Africa to lift? I don't know, but another enthralling detail that goes along these lines is to note that the antipode of the Richat structure today, and by the way, if you're not familiar, an antipode is a location that is directly opposite of another location on our globe. So get this. The antipode of Mauritania is Zealandia, a scientifically confirmed sunken continent that was only discovered in 2017. And considering that many have theorized that what happens on one side of the Earth could
I never knew
potentially
about
affect
this.
the location directly on the other side, this detail is worthy of discussion. And by the way, let me give a quick shout out to my great friend Nikki of the Nikkiana Jones YouTube podcast channel for sharing this highly thought-provoking detail with me. Definitely go to her channel and hit the subscribe button, as she is completely awesome. Her personality and inquisitive mindset are infectious, and I know that you'll just love her. Now, one last final yet important argument to be made related to the Richat Atlantis theory is that many will say that the measurements provided by Plato for the size of the capital city make the Richat far too large. However, I disagree and would argue that the true measurements would surely have been lost in translation over the course of some 12,000 years and through the numerous changes of language that would have, of course, occurred during the passing of that prolonged time. I mean, it's not like anyone today speaks Latin, which was once a common language, and heck, even the modern English language itself is only 500 years old and derives from Old English, which is quite a bit different, and in that in itself is only 1,500 years old. Make no mistake, languages are constantly changing, and keeping up with measurements, I would argue, could be a very difficult challenge, especially over 12,000 years. And Solon went out of his way to describe this issue of interpretation when he stated that he would endeavor to the best of his ability to describe the specifics of Atlantis. And considering that Atlantis was said to be busy all day and all night, it's fair to say that the local population would have had to have been in the millions, just as we find in other busy cities throughout the world today. So the city of Atlantis would have had to have been large enough to inhabit a sizable population. I mean, let's note that modern metropolitan areas are very comparable to the size of the Richat. For example, the Paris metro area is well over 20 miles from one side to the other, and the same can be said for modern-day Cairo. The reality is that lost in translation is a very real thing, because even the ancient Greek word used by Plato to use and describe the word island of Atlantis was the word Nessos, which when you research the origins of that word, you find that it has 5 different translations, which include not just the word island, but promontory, peninsula, coast, and even describes land within a continent that is surrounded by lakes, rivers, or streams, which would be a completely appropriate word to describe the Richat structure at that time. When you add all of these details that I've shared throughout this video together, I'd say that the Pomponius Mea map is probably the least compelling part, as it may just be talking about the Atlas people who lived under the ancient Mauritanian king of the same name. At least that's how some will come to dismiss this. But then again,
okay, Tricky, God bless, mate. Go and have a good sleep.
Name Atlas was carried down and reused just as people do with names today. All I know is that the numerous details shared in this video are too astounding to be ignored. And Atlantis or not, whether it ever existed or whether or not the Richat structure would be the long-lost location, If nothing else, like I said earlier, the Richat structure should be listed on Natural Wonders of the World. And not only that, the very nature of the Sahara Desert, having clear evidence that the ocean blasted over it far more recently than 56 to 66 million years ago, should be a topic that is front and center among researchers, scientists, climate scientists, and everybody. Geologists, this is significant. So I know some people dismiss the possibility of Atlantis and ridicule the Richat theory. Great. But like, we need to talk about the science aspect of this and what the heck happened to the Sahara Desert. Now, I must share something that I am incredibly...
So anyways, we'll move on from here. That was the end of the video. So David, in your thoughts on all of this, what are your thoughts when viewing this possible location? I know when I saw it, I was pretty blown away. I thought, wow, this might actually be it, you know, out of all the things I've seen.
I'm deeply impressed. I give the guy an A+. It's an extremely compelling argument. The visual is so striking. From having read about Atlantis and looked at a lot of artist conceptions of what Atlantis would look like. I mean, that's it. I mean, you just see that, and that's a stunning visual right there in the desert with the evidence of the, the sea fossils and everything.
So you going as well, are you, bro?
I've ever seen.
Very much so. And I never actually looked at the top of the Sahara like that and seen what he pointed out, where it's very clear that a water came right over the top of that, and especially in that volcano area where it washed away a lot of the volcanic ash and stuff, that rock there. That's pretty amazing to me that took place right there. I mean, that's something that I never heard of nor thought of. And I actually didn't realize that Africa was lush that short of time ago. Yeah. You know, and of course I don't believe in 65 million old Earth, and I don't believe in the Earth spinning and tilting and all that. I believe in the structure that the Bible describes as our Earth, but the destruction of civilizations that got too advanced is a common theme throughout all of history. We see it in Babylon, we see it in Tyre, we see it in, we've even seen it in America, right? We've seen, maybe not through water destruction, but we've seen entire civilizations wiped out. We have remnants of this in civilizations that are ancient here in our country that nobody seems to understand what's going on, and our government's covering up. This is all over the world. This is amazing.
Yeah, and it's also amazing that there at the Great Pyramid that found boats.
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of a clue there. But also there's a fellow by the name of Robert Bivol that has done a lot of work and research on the pyramid. And he claims, as many other researchers have agreed, that the alignment of the pyramid with the belt of Orion, it's like a clock, and that it's pointing to a date, they claim, of about 11,000 BC. That this could be pointing to the date of this cataclysm.
Interesting.
And that perhaps that the pyramid was built right after that time, and with the boats there of the people, trying to protect themselves from another cataclysm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's another very compelling theory, but one thing that is, to me, is obvious, that what people are being told in their secular institutions, they're being lied to. Yeah. They're being lied to big time. And the people that are constructing these scenarios, they know that. The evidence is against them in so many ways, in so many areas, that it's just refreshing when you come to the place where you stop trusting these people, because you're not going to get the truth from them.
And a question I've asked myself, and a lot of people have asked me, and you probably many times, and I'm going to ask you this just because I want to get your thoughts on this. What is the reason why? What is the motivation for the suppression of this knowledge, in your opinion?
Well, I think that they're going to bring things around. They want the idea of this millions and millions and millions of years ago, this ancient Earth that was created by the aliens, and they're going to come back, and here's our ancient creators. I think this could very well be where it's going. This alien disclosure thing.
I think so too. We talked about enchantments in one of the shows we did, and how in order for an enchantment to work, they have to change the idea of who you are. They have to change your identity. They have to change your past and make you believe that that's who you are. And of course, we know this is another rabbit hole, but you know, Hollywood has been the tool of these wizards for a long time. The term Hollywood, for instance, in wand lore, in the Druidism, Hollywood from the holly tree made the perfect wand. That was the wand that they used, and they're using it to compose everything that's going on, your reality, our enchantment. And only a certain amount of people have been able to see past that. And I believe that's a biblical thing where God gives you the ability to have your blindfold moved to this world. But the reality is we are under an enchantment, and part of that enchantment, I believe, is falling apart right now to where either the world's going to accept the deceit or they're going to accept the reality. I believe that's happening as we speak.
I do too. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. You know, we see all the signs with all this disclosure coming forth. I mean, it's really hard for people to hide the things that they used to hide with all the technology we have today, cameras everywhere, with being able to, you know, save data on people, intelligence, the intelligence level that we're operating at because of technocrats and because of, you know, things like Facebook, Google, all of these organizations that are an eye to all of the people. You know, obviously Satan is the ultimate intelligence officer. He's the one that goes and accuses everybody. He's gathering intelligence on the entire world right now. This is his mode of operation, and it's pretty amazing the idea of what we're living in. But I think helping people understand the enchantment is a great way for them to see past it, like we talked about before in magician's trick. And you see the trick, it seems really amazing, but when you understand how it works, it doesn't seem quite so amazing. It just seems like a cool trick, right? Well, that's what hopefully we're trying to do with this information, like tonight, even though this is just, you know, about it, it's very, to me, it's significant. I think it's interesting. To other people, it's going to be interesting as well. But the whole point of shows like this is to pull the wool, so to speak, out and show people the trick of the magician. So,
yeah. And that one fellow there by this gentleman there, that's Graham Hancock, who we've referenced a couple times. And you could call these people truthers, you know, kind of like, you know, back in the day, there was the 9/11 truthers and the conspiracy truthers and all of this. And if a person is not even a believer, if they just look at the evidence, they know, they can see that the lies are huge that we're being told. And what we're seeing happening, and these people are playing a good role. They're presenting evidence that's showing what we've been told is not true. And hopefully what we can do is bring people back to the Word of God, where everything is going to make sense when they look at what Scripture says and understand that we've got it all right here. There's some amazing texts. It talks about a tire just sinking, which cannot be the tire of Scripture, just absolutely sinking.
Yeah.
And there's so many things in Scripture we've talked about on a lot of other shows that just give so much weight to put a picture of what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be exactly what happens to all these civilizations. They come to this huge point of power and integration, and to a point of just usually it turns into depravity. I mean, we see what's happening with the leaders in our world right now. You know, just bringing back something that people may have forgot about, but the Epstein thing showed so much about how our leaders are literally preying upon the humans in our society, preying upon them.
My goodness, yeah.
It's disgusting to see that kind of stuff is going on, but this is just the reality we live in, man. I mean,
yeah. And the Henry Morris, who was the father of creation science, in the Genesis record, he said that, and he was calculating this because of the gaps in the genealogies. Bishop Usher did a great job, fantastic job.
Yeah.
But Morris makes a great case that he did not consider specific gaps in the genealogy that he said could push the date for the Garden of Eden back possibly to 9 to 10,000 BC.
Yeah.
And that would be very much in the ballpark of what Hancock and these other fellows are coming up for an 11,000 BC cataclysm.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not even to talk about the pre-Adamite concept of this, which is beyond our purview. But yeah, this is, you can begin to see And increasingly, the waters are getting less muddy the more you look at it to get a picture of what actually happened.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's so true. And I'm thankful that we're able to see these things. And even though we don't really deserve, David, to see what we're seeing, it's just, it's such a thing to be grateful for that God is opening our eyes, but also all of you listening tonight, your eyes are being open to this, which is, you can't say that for at least 2/3 of the population of the world. Completely under a mind control spell, completely under an enchantment.
Yeah.
And so we should be grateful, not lofty because of our knowledge, but grateful that God has seen fit to allow us to see the enchantment for what it is, see the illusion for what it is. I mean, everything in our world is an illusion. The money we use is paper. It's like, it's worthless, right? We use it everywhere. And some people die for it, do everything for it, but it's an illusion. And once we can see past these things, man, it just creates a beautiful path for us to walk on. And it's interesting because, I was talking to my wife about this today because we were talking about, she was telling me about, because she's going through the entire Bible with like a study group, and they were in the part where Lot's wife, I can't remember, Sarah is her name, right? No, not Sarah. Lot's wife, I can't ever remember her name. She turns around and the pillar turns into a pillar of salt. And the idea that she looks back on the city, probably loves the city. They picked that area with the city. Lot did when Abraham said, look, you choose here, you choose there. Lot and his family chose that area, the city life, they chose all that. And she had this desire to see the city, I guess, look back and just look back on it. And I think about that in America, for instance. There's going to be a lot of people that are praying so hard for America to be restored, praying so hard for this and happen, that they're going to look back on what is going on here, and they're gonna hope for America. They're gonna hope for this Atlantis again, right? They're gonna hope for this civilization, not realizing that this civilization has pretty much poked God's eye over and over again by the murder of the innocent, by the children being trafficked, by all of the idolatry that's in our country. They're looking back on this country with sympathetic eyes and all of this. And this is the same kind of story with Atlantis. There's people looking back on it with sympathetic eyes, just like in the study we did with the Anakim, the Anunnaki. They were looking back pre-flood with sympathetic eyes, trying to get back to that time when they could have their 10 rulers back, when they could storm the throne room of God and take over. And we're seeing it play out so strong right now.
Oh, we sure are. And it's reminiscent. Had the text from Plato that talked about in one day and one night it was gone.
Yeah.
And the book of Revelation talks about Babylon the Great in 1 hour before destruction.
Yeah, I said that earlier.
And a very strong case can be made that Babylon the Great, Revelation 18, sounds a lot like New York City.
Yeah.
And and to just think about, the corollary there with Lot's wife, the impact that would have for that just to go away.
Yeah. In that quick of time, just everything that you thought you knew, just boom, gone. Man, what an amazing thought, because that could happen. The Bible says it's going to happen. This is going to come upon us like a thief in the night. It says, right, this destruction is just going to come like that, man. Like, and there's no time to prepare for it. Before I was a believer, I had this dream, and I don't think it was a prophetic dream, but it was a dream to wake me up. During the time when I had it, the whole world was being destroyed in this dream that I had. And all I could think about was these verses in Revelation that my parents and my teachers and all that had told me about in the Bible, about the sky rolling up like a scroll and everything just kind of like going down at once. And all I could think about in the dream was this. And I remember, thinking, I need to grab my Bible, I need to read, I need to know what's going on. And by the time I grabbed it, it was too late, right? There was no time to prepare. That was it. I think that's what the Bible talks about too, and having the virgins with the oil prepared. They know it's coming, right? It's not going to take them by surprise. It's going to be here, and they're going to see it coming. But in that dream, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. It was too late by the time I didn't even have a chance to repent, to pray out to God in that dream. And I hope that a lot of you guys take what we're saying here and really think about, you have a decision to make. You have a decision to make today, I believe. You have a decision to make, the path toward life or the path toward death. And don't wait too long to make that decision, because I'm telling you right now, it may come a time when you don't have the chance to make that decision. It'll be way too late.
Yeah, it is certainly the case. We might have a little bit of predictive programming in the original Planet of the Apes movie with Charlton Heston, when he was walking into the ruins of the old city and he looks over and he sees the decapitated head of the Statue of Liberty laying over there. You know?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that day, honestly. It's weird to say that, but I am looking forward to the day when all the idols are taken out.
Yeah, well, you know, I said the other, a couple of Fridays ago, I was just so grieved that the politicians are not going to stop the child trafficking and the child recruitment. It's not going to stop. And the only thing that's going to stop it is the judgment of God.
Yeah.
And I would rather see the judgment of God put an end to that than for that to continue. I really would.
Yeah. I mean, God's blessings are amazing. And I believe that our country has been blessed above and beyond probably any civilization that's ever existed on the face of the earth. And there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I believe we're living off the blessings of those that came before us. And it's time, even in the Bible, there's always this 400-year cycle, it seemed like, to where the people that founded the country were just, believers and everything happened good and blessings took place. And then you see this slide that takes place of the people, just the morality of the people just declines so far deep into a hole that time comes up and boom. And we're looking at 400 years, 1600s are around the time when the Pilgrims settled the United States, the true believers that before the constitutionalists, before all of the revolutionaries that came over here, before the Freemason 1776, thing happened, there were true believers that lived here on this country that came in here. And a lot of people will down the Puritans 100%. And there's a lot of things that they did that were not correct. Of course, you have that with any civilization. No matter what civilization you bring up, no matter group of people, religious people, you're going to have some people that just take it too far and just go above and beyond what is considered loving or in any way, shape, or form right. You have that no matter what. And of course, now the Puritans are trying to be demonized. I don't know if you've seen, there's a show on Netflix called Wednesday. It's about the Addams family. And the girl Wednesday goes to this school for like people like her, like magic families or whatever. And they live in the schools in this town of Puritans, like a Puritan town, to where they still have this Puritan fair that happens every year. And it just really demonizes the Puritans in a way. And this is wildly popular, by the way, amongst teenagers. But the Puritans were some godly people, and we're living off their blessings, I think, to this day. And now the judgment's pretty ripe.
Yeah, we absolutely are.
Yeah. So with that being said, David, I think we are at a good place to end tonight's broadcast. I'm really just want to say this before we end. I'm just super grateful for all of you that listen and support what we do. We could not nor would not do this without you. This is a blessing from God to be able to reach as many people as we have been able to reach. I was looking at our numbers in 2022, and just on YouTube alone, just on Midnight Ride on YouTube alone, we've had over 8 million people have watched our videos this year in the previous year, 2022. That is amazing to me.
Blessing. It's just so thankful. And I believe we're living in a time that the prophet Daniel spoke of, when knowledge will be increased.
Yes.
And the amount of information that just the average person can access and look at. And just last month, we added into our FOJC library, I'd have to, about 20,000 digital copies of books, all kinds of rare books. I mean, the stuff you can get it cheaply, is just phenomenal. And stuff like this, people are researching, and the average person can research and find out the truth about so many things right now, that it's just a great time to be able to stand up and preach the gospel. And what a blessing to be able to be a part of a broadcast like the Midnight Ride that can speak Christ into the hearts of people that are searching and looking for answers. It's just a blessing beyond expression.
Man, so true. And feeling the weight of that, is just
It's about this woman trying to solve this super weird murder, but the killer is from another.
Oh, I like smoking.
Hi there, I'm Gary Stearman, and we have a guest who you know. I know that many of you have seen him time and time again. This is a very special visit from L.A. Marzulli. And why is it special? It's special because we're talking about something that I think that everybody should be conscious of. But L.A., this phenomenon that we're going to speak of, and by the way, you've made a production concerning one particular crop circle. There, I've said it. We're going to talk about crop circles, and everybody ignores them. And why do they?
At their own peril, absolutely at their own peril, because they are messages, and these messages are saying something to us. It's a warning, in my opinion.
Yep.
A warning from whom? Who would be sounding this warning?
Well, the prince of the power of the air, because these things appear overnight in fields of rapeseed and fields of wheat all over the world, but there's a heavy concentration of them in the UK. And that's where they first started to appear. But it even goes back further. In the 1600s, the first crop circle appeared, and they call it the mowing devil. And the villagers came out and they saw the crops laid down, and immediately they attributed to the handiwork of the dragon, i.e. the devil, Satan. So now you move into modernity, and the crop circles start appearing again overnight in a field of wheat or rapeseed or other crops. And at first they're very simple, and over a period of time they become more elaborate and more elaborate.
Now, I've seen LA's production on this subject. It's called Crop Circles, Exposing the Secret Language of the Dragon. And that just about says it all, the secret language of the dragon. Crop circles are a kind of language, although people, blow them off. Met a couple of guys out there. They've spent the evening in the tavern, and they take some rope and some 2x4s, and they go out in a wheat field and they make crop circles. And hey, that's all it. Mystery solved. There's no problem. But that's not true. We've got here a kind of language, if you will, a supernatural language written in various kinds of grasses, crops, meadows, and this is what's amazing, even in places where it's virtually impossible to write, and we're talking about tall corn.
Mm-hmm.
Ever been in a cornfield?
I have, yes.
And you think, I'm going to run through this corn. No, you don't. If you run into one, it's like running into a tree. And in other words, they're tough, they're stiff, almost like they're made of some kind of a fiberglass material.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet, whatever is doing this crop circle phenomenon can take a corn stalk and bend it without breaking it. How does it work?
And you just said something really important, that they bend the crop. The real crop circles you can tell in a couple of ways. The crop, whether it's wheat or corn, it's not broken. The stalks are not broken. They're bent. And the nodes where each part of the plant are, usually they're expanded. Many people that have studied this believe that there's some sort of microwave energy over the field, which is creating this. Plus, and you mentioned the stalk stoppers, which is string and a board, and they would stop. If you haven't seen videos of it, the guy's walking through the field, he's got holding the rope around his neck, he's holding the rope, and he's pulling it up and then stomping with his feet. So he's like going like this through the field and creating the pattern. We're not disputing that. We know that that's what happened. But there's evidence in the crop circles themselves, and the scientific community has looked at this. The fact that the nodes are blown open, you don't get that from just stomping on a field of wheat. Some high energy microwave-like energy wave was over the field, created it, and we see the evidence of it in the stalks themselves, which is mind-blowing. But you talk about the field of corn. In the real crop circles, the grain or whatever it is, specifically the one behind us, the corn, there's sections in those circles where the corn is laid like this. It's interwoven, one stalk upon another. So you're trying to tell me that at 2 o'clock in the morning, a couple of chuckleheads go out there and start bending the crop and weaving it? No. And then the crop isn't broken, it's bent. The nodes are expanded. They've also done studies with the seeds from the wheat or the rapeseed or whatever, and these seeds mature much, much faster than the normal seeds. So something is going on, and in my opinion, there's a supernatural component to it. And this is part of the whole UFO disclosure series, which, as you know, we've been doing, and it's an important part.
Now, this is kind of a, if you will, a fine art out there in the countryside. And by the way, some of the circles are not circles. Some are angular.
Yes.
Some have even featured a picture of an alien's head. And that alien's head happens to be next to a very large crop circle that does seem to be encoded, and a lot of computer experts have tried to decode it, and some think they have. In other words, we're looking at a kind of an earthly message board, and somebody is coming in and writing their little messages and leaving them for some reason. And who are they talking to? What are they saying? What are they doing, LA? Because if we can't at least make a stab at that, we sort of have to ignore it and say, man, that's too much for me. I'm going to go in and make myself a peanut butter sandwich. This makes my head spin. Why are we even discussing this subject? Everybody ignores it. They say, oh, hey, Martha, there's a crop circle, another crop circle. And she says, oh, those things happen all the time. Come in and let's eat dinner. And they just ignore what to me is a phenomenal, shall we call it a warning? I don't know.
There was a movie a few years ago called Signs, and it talked about the crop circles, and it had a very nefarious agenda. And of course, the entities who were doing it were extraterrestrials, and they had nefarious plans for us. We're saying from a biblical view, a biblical worldview, biblical paradigm, that these entities that are doing it are not from some faraway star system. They are, in fact, interdimensional entities. In fact, the entire series that we've done is based on the biblical prophetic narrative, stating that they're not from Zeta Reticuli, they're interdimensional. They are the prince, these are the fingerprints of the prince of the power of the air, i.e. the dragon, i.e. Satan. These are signs. And what they do in a farmer's field, the farmer walks out there in the morning and he goes, oh my gosh, how did this happen? And you know, Gary, some of these fields are way out in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And the idea of a couple of guys with stalk stoppers, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, making these intricate designs. And you talked about the circles are one thing, but then you get the angles. Then you get the alien face. And we show this. It happened in Crabwood. It's called the Crabwood glyph. And the late David Flynn deciphered that, as well as his brother Mark. They're twins, Mark and David Flynn. So I interviewed Mark, and some of that makes its way into the film. What's incredible about this, Mark Flynn's logo was an alien, a gray, holding a disc. This is way back when. And the crop circle that appears in the Crabwood circle is an alien head holding a disc. I mean, it's almost exactly alike. There is a message, and I'll tease you a little bit here with this. This is the work of the late David Flynn, which is absolutely extraordinary. When you begin to decipher the mathematics in the Crabwood glyph, there's a link between Crabwood and 1947 and the Roswell crash. It's embedded in the Crabwood glyph. And that is absolutely astounding. That's the work of the late David Flynn. He was the one who went in and deciphered that. But of course, once again, it's his brother's company logo with the alien head holding that disc. And there it is in Crabwood, the UK, 1,947 miles from Roswell, New Mexico. And we know that the alleged disc crashed in Roswell in 1947. So there's absolutely, the language of the dragon, in my opinion, is geometry, advanced mathematics. And that's what we see embedded in these circles.
In other words, in a way, this is a message from the dark side to humanity saying, we know what you're doing, we're watching you, and we're responding with little flags out here. Why would they want to do that? What's the motivation, and why has this accelerated?
It's this cat and mouse game that we see all throughout the UFO phenomenon, from Close Encounters of the First Kind to the 60, 70-year cover-up of the Roswell crash, to now on Tucker Carlson talking about, UFOs are real, they're burgeoning and not going away, with a steady stream of guests. The latest one, Nick Pope, telling us that, now they're the Pentagon once again revealing or releasing what once was classified information. So our government is telling us that this phenomenon is real. The cat and mouse game with the crop circles has created a group of followers who believe that these are, in fact, our space brothers. I know you and I adamantly state these are not our space brothers. And there's a signature here, which I call it convergence. We were actually thinking about calling the
Okay, it's their audio, guys. Okay, the audio doesn't work on that. Oh, man. Oh, man. Got nothing else lined up. No. Hang on, guys. I'm finding something else. Yeah, maybe they did censor him because he hasn't come back. Okay, let me find something else. Hang on, guys. I'm trying to find something to watch. Okay, I got it. Got it. Hang on. I'm nearly going anyway, guys, so I'll finish with some Jews finding Jesus videos like we usually do.
Days a week in a yeshiva, and then it's like the penny dropped.
Actually, it was my audio, I think.
Ellen Marzulli, Bill Salas, and many
It
others.
was my audio, not theirs.
Important place, and by the way, we're putting our mark on it, and it's still ours. It's, to me, it's almost like a claim of ownership.
I agree.
When you
It's
go
like
out,
a stamp.
a stamp and a seal from the dark side. And it's happening increasingly in this time period, in which we unabashedly refer to as the latter days. And the signs are all around us, but the crop circles sort of put a little accent on it.
They do, and circling back, no pun intended, to the Chillicothe site. So you've got the Chillicothe site right here, and the 43 circles, second largest crop circle in the United States history, okay? 43 circles, it's called Dragon's Head. That's what the crop circle researchers call it, Dragon's Heads. There it is. Well, the crop circle, let's say I'll use a prop, is here, right across, it's next to a river, and directly across from this crop circle are the Chillicothe earthworks, the mounds. And so what's astounding about this is this crop circle appears within a day or two. either on the same day, the day before, or the day after, of the first Nephilim Mounds Conference in Newark, Ohio, where you stood up and delivered a message which changed my life. It's all about the seed. And this is the signature of the dragon. They didn't like this because what we were doing, and this is astounding to think about. You were there, Russ Dizdar was there, and yours truly. The three of us were there uncovering the truth about the mounds, that these are not Native American vestiges, as it were. They did copies of this, but the Serpent Mound, the Great Circle Mound, the Octagon Mound, the mounds that we see in Chillicothe, these were done, in our opinion, I call it Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. So here we are at the Nephilim Mounds Conference, and we're talking about this, revealing for the first time in history what is the truth about all this. And the dragon didn't like it, and that's his signature.
You're listening to L.A. Marzulli, who has produced a DVD on crop circles. What are they? Well, explain a little. And he does, by the way. It's a very, very nice, nicely done, compact production. By the way, L.A. occasionally writes for The Prophecy Watcher, our monthly magazine. And here's how you can get your subscription to that magazine.
Everything that we're doing at Prophecy Watchers is vital because Bible prophecy is coming to pass right before our eyes. And it has never been more important for believers to understand what the Bible says about the days that we are living in. In case you haven't noticed, the whole world is spinning out of control, but we are not surprised because many of the things taking place were prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago. That's why we want to offer you a very special subscription to our magazine, The Prophecy Watcher, that will keep you on the cutting edge of Bible prophecy. Stay informed on prophetic world events. Follow the nuclear threats from Russia and Iran, China's march to world domination, the likelihood of another global pandemic, the rise of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, war in the Middle East, the UFO phenomenon, and the latest technology preparing the world for the mark of the beast. The Prophecy Watcher magazine features articles from leading prophecy experts like Gary Stearman, Mondo Gonzalez, Thomas Ice, Randall Price, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, and many others. With your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, you will receive 12 issues of the magazine in either print or digital format. You will also receive 10 bonus DVDs that feature in-depth teaching on the ancient Book of Enoch, Heaven and the New Jerusalem, the biblical case for the rapture, a look at how God put the gospel in the stars, what really happened at the Tower of Babel, and Ezekiel's prophecy on the Battle of Gog and Magog. This special offer is available anywhere in the United States with free shipping included. Don't wait. Pick up the phone right now and call the toll-free number on your screen or visit us at prophecywatchers.tv. Stand with us today and help us take the message of Christ's soon return to the whole world.
With us, L.A. Marzulli. Always good to talk to L.A. It's always a contest to see who can talk the most. But I defer to you, sir. And you are pushing away here at a concept that I think should be born into the brain of every Christian. That we are living in times when Satan and the forces of Satan, what Paul wrote about in Ephesians, and he said, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness in heavenly places. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, the Bible tells us that when the dragon shows up, that Satan will come with all signs,
yes,
and lying wonders. Now, if this isn't a sign, I don't know what is. It's happening in modernity, although we can trace it back into the 16th century. I understand that, but it's accelerating. They appear year after year, and some of these are just incredibly complex. There's also a clip that we show, and it shows a field. I believe it's wheat, but I could be wrong. And there are these two orbs over the field and they're circling the field like this. And as they're doing it, we show this in the film, a crop circle emerges right underneath the orbs. Other people have seen this. Other people have actually seen the orbs creating the crop circles. So we're looking at some sort of technology that, dare I say, is beyond anything that we have here.
You know, you're reading my mind, because the word technology had popped into my head just before you used it. This is what we're talking about here. Satan has technology.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I've got my ever-present copy of the Book of Enoch here. And you know, when you read the Book of Enoch, what do you read about? You read about fallen angels who came down. One of them, well, their leader was named Azazel, a name that shall live in infamy forever. And he taught men scientific principles. In fact, all of those fallen angels came to teach humanity how to do certain things that God didn't necessarily
forbidden knowledge
approve of or acknowledge. And the if you will, motivation behind the satanic is always to try to corrupt men's minds, and that's what they're doing today.
Well, not only that, but and I agree with you. They're corrupting the minds of human beings through this deception.
Exactly.
They're leading them along, and the end game is deception, and this is I would dare I say, the counterbalance to what Ancient Aliens, with all due respect, on the History Channel is promulgating every Friday. We have the answers from a biblical narrative, from a biblical perspective, from a biblical paradigm. We're showing that, no, this is not from Zeta Reticuli or some space brothers who are here for our own good. This is deception. And just like the devil, the dragon deceived Eve in the garden, that's what we're looking at now.
Not extraterrestrials from some other galaxy.
Epsilon Eridani.
Epsilon Eridani, which is the name that always pops into our minds, but not coming from another galaxy, but coming from another, if you will, dimension. The dimension in the heavens. And by the way, you know, Paul himself talks about the third heaven, and dimensionality is a big part of the Bible. So we're not supposed to be ignorant about it. And just across the visual barrier, there are principalities and powers and rulers of darkness, and there's their slaves, the demons. You and I believe that the little gray guys that drive the little UFOs, and everybody reports on seeing them. Those are just little bondservants, little slaves.
Absolutely.
Of the demonic.
Yeah.
And they do the work. But the demonic work is to corrupt the mind of mankind and to persuade man that he's being visited by beneficent overlords who have come here to help us. And they've come from long ago and far, far away.
And really what's at stake here is this usurps the authority of the God of the Bible.
It
does. Because if God didn't create us, and the neo-Darwinists are promulgating this all day long, who did? Maybe, in fact, when Ben Steins was down with Richard Dawkins.
They actually sound like Foo Fighters, don't they? Very good pickup.
In his classic film, Expelled No Intelligence Allowed. And he asked Dawkins, well, where do you think life began? How did this all start? And Dawkins looks at him and says, well, it could have happened this way. And he goes off, you know, in a galaxy far, far away, we were created here by an advanced race of extraterrestrials and then seated here. And that usurps the God of the Bible. This is what's at stake. This is why we're making the film. We're pointing back and saying, no, we weren't created by extraterrestrials. Jesus spoke us into existence. He created all things, and without him was nothing that was not made that was made.
And that's preached week in and week out, day in and day out by those of us who are doing the work of the Lord. But there's something else, and there is I think the idea of being awake to the possibility that there is an enemy out there working to destroy everything that God has built. And I think Christians, in many cases, are very ignorant about that. And that's why we have guys like you coming in and presenting their products. But speaking of which, let's pause here, and I want you to see how you can obtain LA's DVD.
L.A. Marzulli's passion for biblical truth has taken him on archaeological adventures all around the world. He believes that we'll soon see full government disclosure surrounding the exploding UFO phenomenon, perhaps as a way to explain away the rapture of the church. And when it comes to the 6th chapter of Genesis, a study on the hybrid giants of the Bible, LA is one of the world's leading experts on the subject. His latest film, Crop Circles, Exposing the Secret Language of the Dragon, is his 5th film in his UFO disclosure series. There's nothing more bizarre than these complicated designs that appear overnight in highly charged demonic locations like Stonehenge in England or the Serpent Mount in Ohio. No one really has a logical explanation. It's supernatural. You're going to learn about these mysterious images on LA's new film and hear from the experts. The images in the wheat fields may be aliens, complicated mathematical formulas, serpents, astronomical secrets, precise architectural drawings, and peculiar messages of peace to mankind. Satan's army of fallen angels seems to be entertaining us just beyond the veil. LA's new film is available for your gift of $25 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. Just call the toll-free number you see on your screen. The air.
We're talking about the enemy here, and we're talking about our government and many world governments rolling out the red carpet for the enemy, giving them publicity, presenting them as possibly our helpers, the people who have come here from a distance away to help man reach the next level of.
That's exactly what they'll say. A golden age.
A golden age. I think, yeah, that says it all. And you and I, of course, do not hold with that.
No, we believe that this is part of the coming great deception. And remember, let no one deceive you. Let no one deceive you. Jesus' warnings. So something is happening all around us. We need to wake up.
And the crop circle that you really feature, the starring Dragon's Head crop circle, it would be impossible to make. Human beings can't make these things, and you show why in your DVD.
Absolutely.
And then the conclusion that must be drawn is, if humans didn't do it, somebody else did. Why are they doing what they are doing? Should we be conscious of this? And the answer, of course, is yes. And why should we be conscious?
Because it's an elaborate deception. It's pulling people away from the God of the Bible. Your kids and your grandkids, I guarantee you, know more about the stuff than you do, which is why get the DVD, get the series, invite a bunch of people over, your family members, watch them, and then talk about it and discuss. This is it's part of the coming great deception, and that's why we're making the films.
And I'm glad that you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you, Gary.
L.A. Marzulli, he's talking about crop circles.
Okay, guys, I'm out as well. God bless. See you tomorrow.